Chapter 614. Yeah, the first news came from Facebook. You must know something about it. Rachel asked. Yeah, I've followed it. There is indeed such a person. That's right. Marshall nodded in appreciation, thinking that Mike's information network was pretty good. Mike glanced at Jiang Tian proudly. Jiang Tian sipped the red wine in his glass and ignored him. This guy seemed to be pursuing Rachel, and was treating him as a rival in love? Now this Kong Techu is the god that the people of Sidoni believe in. He is the godfather and guardian of the king. In fact, he is the real master of Sidoni. This is too amazing. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Sidoni was a warlord that had been fighting for more than 10 years, and was controlled by the United States, Russia, and the United Kingdom. Gradually, an image formed in her mind. As she watched, the sentimental Rachel's beautiful blue eyes began to tear up. It's rumored that Sidoni has more magnetite than Vale. I wonder if it's true? Someone interjected. I've gathered all the information. It's very likely true. Its reserves even exceed the sum of BHP Billiton and Rio Tinto. Mike's eyes flashed with a hint of pride as he glanced at the silent Jiang Tian. This kind of news was rarely known. But he was in the internet industry and had a data intelligence analysis company, so he knew. If he forms a company, it's very likely that his company will become one of the top 100 companies in the world. His assets are in the hundreds of billions. Someone sucked in a breath of cold air. That's true. Everyone sighed with envy. Of course, he was still some distance away from those deep-rooted big families. But families like Rockefeller and Marshall had many family members and companies under them, and most of them were non-listed companies. The wealth they could mobilize was incalculable. However, even if that was the case, Jiang Taichu was still far behind them. The difference between them and Jiang Taichu was too great. A tycoon said with slight disdain. Yes, I think so too. This Kong Taichu is not a good person. He's the same kind of person as Thorpe. He's not in line with universal values. Everyone expressed their agreement. Jiang Tian couldn't take it anymore. Fuck, am I that bad? Why does it sound like I'm a schemer? I don't think so. Suddenly, Rachel grumbled in dissatisfaction. Jiang Tian nodded in agreement. In fact, Sidoni will not develop the mining industry. Instead, he will develop non-polluting medical and longevity industries. This Mr. Jiang you speak of has no intention of treating Sidoni as his private property. He and Sidoni have established a mutually beneficial relationship. Logically speaking, Jiang Tian supported Rachel's point of view. However, little Princess Rachel was prejudiced by first impressions and treated Jiang Tian as a playboy who attracted her attention. At this moment, he thought that Jiang Tian was trying to attract his attention. She rolled her eyes at Jiang Tian and snorted disdainfully. How would you know? You're not Kong Techu. Are you a roundworm in his stomach? Jiang Tian smiled helplessly. I'm Kong Techu. Rachel fiercely glared at Jiang Tian. Then, with a yearning expression, she said to herself, I wonder what kind of person this Kong Techu is. If only I could marry him. She and Rachel had a good relationship. They were like sisters. However, Rachel considered herself as a top student of a famous school, and always mocked her for being big-breasted and brainless. Paris was holding back her naughty thoughts. She wanted to see Rachel's shocked and embarrassed look. As for Jiang Tian's attitude, she thought that Jiang Tian wouldn't be angry with Rachel. Rachel was Jiang Tian's fan. It was just that she hadn't realized that her idol was right in front of her. If he's half as capable as Kong Techu, I'll marry him immediately. Rachel snorted and rolled her eyes at Mike in disdain. Of course. Mike smiled embarrassedly and didn't dare to refute. And he has a close relationship with the army. He's supported by them. Mike's face changed slightly. His mouth moved a few times, but he didn't say anything in the end. At this moment, Mr. Marshall, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke. As far as I know, this magical Mr. Jiang isn't some bigwig in Yanjing. He's a magical magician. Magician? Everyone exclaimed in confusion. Is he like Harry Potter? Rachel giggled. She obviously took her grandpa's words as a joke. Something like that. Everyone was stunned. They couldn't believe it and started to discuss. Most of them were scientists and engineers. They graduated from famous universities such as Stanford and Harvard. Marshall's face turned slightly stern as he enunciated each word clearly. Everyone was completely speechless. They looked at each other worriedly. Oh no, Mr. Marshall must have Alzheimer's. Looking at the looks of disbelief on everyone's faces, Marshall said to an old black butler who was standing behind him, "My old friend, show me the photos I bought from the information peddler." "Yes, Mr. Marshall." The old butler went. After a while, he came back with a stack of photos and handed them to everyone. He's like the legendary Superman. "Grandpa, what's going on?" Rachel was even more amazed, yearning, and admiring. She couldn't hold back her curiosity. "I heard it was like this." Marshall smiled benevolently and spoke tirelessly. His intelligence network was indeed amazing and powerful. What he said was only slightly different from the truth. Looking at the photos in his hand, Jiang Tian frowned and shook his head. These photos were leaked. Seeing Jiang Tian's expression, Rachel suddenly felt that Jiang Tian was pretending. She sneered. "Sir, why do you have such an expression? Do you think that the photos collected by my grandpa are fake?" Chapter 6:15. "No. I just don't think it's worth making a fuss about." Jiang Tian couldn't be bothered with her, and said indifferently, "Adolescent girls were always so unreasonable." "What did you say? It's not worth making a fuss about?" Upon hearing this, Rachel almost went mad with anger. She had seen shameless people before, but she had never seen such a shameless person. Everyone here worshipped this amazing Wuxia Master Kong like a god. Even his grandfather held Grandmaster Jiang in high esteem. "What about you? You single-handedly defeated the 28-man Japanese Army and Air Force Japan, and forced it to bow its head. You single-handedly fought against tens of thousands of warlords and liberated Sidoni. That's not worth making a fuss about? You're just an unknown doctor. What's so great about that? You're really trying to attract my attention. You're willing to do anything." At this moment, Mike looked at his phone, stood up and said with joy, "Mr. Marshall, Professor George is here." Professor George? The honorary dean of Harvard Medical School, winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine, the world's top cancer expert? Rachel stood up abruptly and said with a look of admiration, "That's right, it's him," Mike said proudly. Professor George has a very rich resume. He graduated from the Royal College of Medicine in the United Kingdom with a doctorate. In addition to his teaching position in the United States, he is also the president of the Royal Swedish Society, the chairman of the judging committee for the Nobel Prize in Medicine, a senior partner of Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, and the chief academic consultant of DuPont Chemistry. In the Western medical field, he has a great influence. He can be called the world's top expert in cancer. He looked at Rachel and said flatteringly, "I spent a lot of money to invite him this time. The consultation fee is 10 million USD. Oh, I'll transfer the money to you later." Rachel hurried downstairs to greet Professor George. "Rachel, that's not what I meant." Mike became nervous. He hurriedly followed him and waved his hand. He waved his hand and said, "Mr. Marshall is my angel investor. Without him, I would still be coding in the garage. Of course, I should pay for this." A moment later, the two of them escorted a white-haired old man with a straight back as they walked over. The old man was in his 50s or 60s. He wore a pair of antique gold-framed spectacles and a thin cashmere suit. There was an old pocket watch in the pocket of his vest. He looked elegant, just like an old gentleman in an English manner. "Honorable Mr. Marshall, nice to meet you." In the face of so many world-famous tycoons, Professor George still had a strong aura and was at ease. He didn't look at the others. Instead, he walked straight to Marshall and shook his hand with a smile. "Professor George, nice to meet you. I've heard of you." Marshall smiled weakly. "When was Mr. Marshall's last checkup?" Professor George did not stand on ceremony at all, and immediately began the treatment. He looked at Mike and Rachel and asked, "Professor George, it was this morning." Marshall's family doctor, Anthony, stepped forward and respectfully handed over a stack of documents. This person's background was not to be underestimated. He was a tenured professor at the University of California. According to the citation rate of his papers, he could be ranked in the top 50 in the international medical field. In terms of medical skills and academic achievements, he could surpass many of the top imperial doctors in Wuxia's Redwall Imperial Medical Hall. The checkup done this morning would be useful for reference. Professor George looked at the case, MRI scans, and so on. His face gradually became serious. Seeing that his face was not looking good, everyone gradually became nervous. Rachel didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Professor George put down the documents and pondered for a moment. Finally, he sighed helplessly and said, "Do I need to hide Mr. Marshall's condition from him?" "It's okay, I can take it." Marshall smiled faintly and looked very calm. Professor George said with a pained expression, "Mr. Marshall has late-stage leukemia. It has spread to his joints, lymph nodes, and liver. Many treatment plans have been ineffective, especially after 3 failed bone marrow transplants. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do." As soon as these words came out, there was a dead silence. The originally cheerful atmosphere was swept away. Everyone's face became very ugly. Rachel's tears instantly burst out and rolled down her face. Professor George was a cancer expert and was especially proficient in the treatment of leukemia. He could be said to be the best in the world. Even his own supervisor admired him. If he said there was no way, then there was definitely no way. Mike frowned and said, "Professor George, isn't your cure rate for leukemia 90%? Why is Mr. Marshall's condition?" "Mr. Marshall has some very strange symptoms, such as pain in the wandering state, burning and swelling of the local joints, and so on. These symptoms can't be explained by leukemia. His disease is not ordinary leukemia, but an unknown new type of leukemia." Professor George sighed helplessly. At this time, Rachel and a few of his family members were already crying. Marshall forced a smile and comforted them. "Don't be sad. Coming to this world is like a journey. There will be a day when we have to leave." When Rachel and the others calmed down a little, Marshall pulled himself together and asked with a smile, "Professor George, how long can I live?" "I'm afraid only a month." "A month? That's a long time." Marshall patted the armrest of his wheelchair and laughed heartily. "I can climb Mount Everest, ski, and hunt deer in the forest. I even have time to travel around the world." Mr. Marshall's attitude of transcending life and death is admirable. Professor George was in awe. His face was slightly stern as he praised. "In fact, this new type of leukemia is indeed an incurable disease. Grandpa, I'll go with you." Rachel squatted beside Marshall and lay on his knee. She said with tears in her eyes, "I'll spend a happy time with you." Just as everyone was in a state of silence, their hearts filled with mixed feelings. Incurable disease? It's just a simple disease, like a cold. Is it that difficult to treat? Suddenly, a mocking voice sounded from the corner. Everyone was shocked, and their gazes fell on Jiang Tian in unison. "What did you say? This is leukemia. How can you say it's just a cold? How arrogant." "Yeah, even Professor George can't do anything. How can you say that?" Everyone looked at Jiang Tian in disbelief as they discussed. Originally, Rachel should be happy that someone said that he could treat her grandpa. However, she did not believe Jiang Tian at all. Even Professor George said that a nobody could do it. How could he do it? He obviously wanted to use this method to attract her attention. However, it was a matter of life and death. How could he joke around? Simple? The more Rachel thought about it, the more disgusted she felt. The corner of her mouth twitched. Cancer was a difficult medical problem, not to mention the most difficult type of leukemia that had spread to the lymph nodes. If it were not for the presence of many guests, she would have used the taekwondo she learned in the gym to beat Jiang Tian up. "Which medical school are you from?" "University of California Medical School?" Professor George frowned and looked at Jiang Tian. "No, I graduated from Wuxia's Jinling Pharmaceutical University. It's a second-tier college." "Rinda College?" Jiang Tian said. "I've never heard of it." Professor George shook his head. However, in Wuxia's medical school, the only one that is well known in the world is the medical department of Yanjing University. I remember now. Professor Huang Zhihui seems to be from this school. The family doctor, Anthony, suddenly realized. Oh, Professor Huang Zhihui used to be my teacher and my colleague, Jiang Tian said calmly. Unexpectedly, the family doctor, Anthony, curled his lips and said, however, how can Professor Huang Zhihui's medical skills be compared to Professor George's? Huang Zhihui won the Nobel Prize in Medicine, but the judge at that time was Professor George. He was a little annoyed. He raised his eyebrows and said disdainfully, as Professor Huang Zhihui's student, you want to challenge Professor George's authority? Are you crazy? Another ignorant junior who wants to challenge authority to satisfy his abnormal vanity. Professor George could only smile helplessly in his heart. In fact, he had encountered this kind of situation many times. In Harvard classes, there were often such smart-ass students who challenged their own academic views. Some of them wanted to show their talent and unique views. Some wanted to attract the attention of girls. And some just wanted to post on Twitter to show off. The atmosphere in Harvard was very open. There were often interactions and discussions in class. Most professors encouraged students to think independently and question authority. However, Professor George had never been courteous to such students. He had always shown his profound academic skills, refuted, suppressed, and questioned them repeatedly, making them feel embarrassed. Actually, Professor George was not a narrow-minded person. He allowed constructive discussion and questioning authority. However, medicine was not like philosophy and other social sciences. It allowed speculation and many answers to coexist. In medical science, there was only one correct diagnosis. The best treatment plan was only one. It was either one or the other. Some students, in order to show their talent, found another way. In fact, it was just subversion for the sake of subversion. What was the price? It was a misdiagnosis, an unscientific treatment plan, a delay in the patient's condition, and even a patient who was instinctively cured would die. When he thought of this, he was a little disgusted. He looked at Jiang Tian and said coldly, 3 bone marrow transplants and no hematopoietic stem cells. Do you think there is another way to treat it? Of course. Jiang Tian sipped his wine and said lazily, with my treatment plan, it will be cured in 15 minutes. What did you say? Professor George was stunned. Then he laughed in anger and said coldly, haha, nonsense. Any kind of cancer, even if it's only in the early stages, doesn't need a few months of treatment to kill the cancer cells? 10 minutes? If you can do that, you can win the Nobel Prize in Medicine. Oh no, you should be the chairman of the Nobel Prize in Medicine judging committee. You have no medical knowledge at all. At this moment, Rachel was even more certain. The reason this kid was so pretentious was to attract her attention. However, trying to attract her attention in such a way seemed too stupid. Chapter 6:16. In her opinion, Jiang Tian's words were too easy to test. Was he not afraid of being exposed? In fact, Professor Huang Zhihui's paper was completed under my guidance. Jiang Tian was calm and composed as he said indifferently, to be exact, 80% of the ideas in his paper were provided by me. Professor George, just because you can't do it doesn't mean that others can't. Please be in awe of the unknown. I've read Professor Huang's paper. You said you made contributions, but why didn't you sign your name on the paper? Rachel was so angry that she almost went crazy. She sneered and said, if you could write such a paper, would you give it to others? Why didn't you write it yourself? Everyone nodded in agreement after hearing her question, especially Anthony, who agreed with her even more. For a medical practitioner, the Nobel Prize in Medicine was the highest honor. Who wouldn't want it? Who would want to give it to others and be a nameless hero? Who would believe you? What's so special about the Nobel Prize in Medicine? I can have as much as I want, Jiang Tian said with a lazy smile. Perhaps it was because of the butterfly effect, but unlike in his previous life, in 2009, a female scientist from Wuxia won the Nobel Prize in Medicine. She extracted artemisinin and invented an anti-malaria drug. However, Jiang Tian had thousands of new prescriptions and ingredients in his hands. He could easily solve many difficult and complicated diseases. If he competed for the Nobel Prize, there would be nothing for medical workers on Earth for decades to come. To put it bluntly, his ambition was not in this field. He built the Sunshine Laboratory and the Medicine King Group, just to help his mother and sister realize their dreams. But Jiang Tian's words were especially ear-piercing when heard by others. Is he crazy? Anthony was so angry that he wanted to turn his scalpel into a butcher's knife. I have been in the medical field for decades. I spent more than 18 hours in the library every day, reading literature and materials every day, and working in the laboratory every day. I can't even get the Nobel Prize in medicine after decades of hard work. You can have as much as you want. Rachel was infuriated by this ignorant and arrogant fellow, her body trembling as she looked coldly at Paris. Paris, I don't like him. Dear Leap Wine Cellar doesn't welcome him. Take him away. Otherwise, you won't be welcome here in the future. She and Paris were as close as sisters and had never had an argument. For him to say such harsh words today, it could be seen that he was really angry with Jiang Tian. Rachel, he said that he only needs 10 minutes to cure Marshall. Why don't we let him try? Paris smiled sweetly. This damned lass thinks that she's a top student of a famous school, and always laughs at me for being big-breasted and brainless. This time, I'll make you brainless for once. Is there a need to test such nonsense? Rachel snorted in disdain. He was just an idiot who wanted to attract her attention. Dr. Jiang, how do you plan to treat him? Professor George asked with a smile. Chinese medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine. The family doctor, Anthony, immediately sneered in disdain. He said with disdain, traditional Chinese medicine is nothing but superstition and witchcraft to deceive the villagers. How can it cure him? Hearing this, Jiang Tian's eyes flashed with coldness. Let's make a bet. If I can cure him with traditional Chinese medicine, will you eat shit? Vulgar. If you can cure him, I'll eat shit. The family doctor, Anthony, was so angry that he almost exploded on the spot. In Wuxia wine cellar, in such a high-end upper-class society, how could he say such words? However, what was even more depressing was that he actually agreed to this boring bet. Where was the demeanor and cultivation of a scholar? Alas, he had been led into a ditch by this kid. He was really too infuriating. Professor George was slightly solemn and said, Dr. Jiang, I don't think this is possible. I also have a certain degree of understanding of traditional Chinese medicine. It is said that the effect of traditional Chinese medicine is very slow. Compared to Western medicine, it needs a longer time. There is an ancient proverb in Wuxia. Words are no proof, seeing is believing. Jiang Tian's hand shook, took out an exquisite medicine bottle, got up and put it on the tea table. If Mr. Marshall takes this pill, he will be cured in 10 minutes. You can test for cancer cells and other indicators. You really know how to act. You even took out the props. This bottle is quite beautiful. Rachel said in disbelief. Haha. Jiang Tian laughed. If it weren't for Paris, he wouldn't have bothered to deal with the Marshall family. He also didn't bother to say anything. He had already taken out the pill. The opportunity was already in front of him. Whether he cherished it or not, whether he had the foresight or not, it was up to him. What? Guilty conscience? You can't pretend anymore. It's not too late for you to scram now. In Rachel's eyes, this expression was a sign of guilt. You're crazy. If Mr. Marshall wants to eat it, hurry up. If not, hurry up and say something. Don't waste my time. Jiang Tian was speechless towards this girl. As soon as they met, she targeted him as if he had molested her. But I've never seen you before. Since you don't know me, why are you purposely making trouble for me? You dare to scold me. Do you believe that I'll call the bodyguards to beat you up? Rachel looked at Jiang Tian with hatred. She thought that after being exposed, this kid would be so ashamed that he couldn't show his face. She didn't expect this guy to call her crazy. You're the crazy one. You're sick all over. Rachel's full chest heaved violently. She was so angry that she was about to explode. Oh. I understand now. She must have read the popular Wuxia novels about domineering CEOs. She's poisoned too deeply. Now that online novels have been translated out to sea, she might also know Chinese. Jiang Tian suddenly had a flash of inspiration and found the reason. He looked at her with pity and couldn't help but shake his head. He said sincerely and earnestly, Don't think that I'll notice you and fancy you just because you're making trouble for me. I'll tell you clearly that this idea is very childish. This kind of trick will only have the opposite effect. The more Jiang Tian thought about it, the more he felt that it made sense. Shinmange, Li Jinju, the Hilton sisters, and even Sasaki Haisha all had ulterior motives towards him. Tang Linglong, that wretched girl, had already confessed to him and ran away from home. It seemed that Rachel was the same, but she had taken an unconventional approach. Although you're far from Qing'er and Ling-Er in terms of looks, you're not ugly. Why are you pestering me? Jiang Tian's heart was extremely melancholy. In fact, accepting Ling-Er made him feel very uneasy. He originally only wanted to be with Ling-Er for the rest of his life. Now there were so many women staring at him. It was really annoying. Jiang Tian was extremely depressed in his heart. Being chased by women was actually not a good thing. As a reborn person, the pear mountain was huge. Thinking of this, he sighed helplessly. I only like gentle and elegant women. The most important thing is that I have a wife. I definitely won't like you. Just give up. I like you? You want me to give up? Rachel's body swayed and she almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Next to her, Mike had already spat out a mouthful of red wine and slapped his thigh with laughter. Damn, this competitor basically had no hope. You're too narcissistic. You're an egomaniac. I hate you to death. I'd be crazy if I liked you. Rachel was so angry that she danced. You're the one who's bluffing to attract my attention, okay? When did I become the one who likes you? Fuck you. Also, what's the meaning of your pitiful gaze? Am I pitiful? I'm the little princess of the Marshall family. The shares that I hold are worth billions of dollars. You don't know how many people are chasing after me. Do you think that no one wants me? Why would I like you? That's hilarious. Rachel gritted her teeth and her face kept twitching as if it was going to explode. Let me try. Marshall did not speak from beginning to end. Instead, he watched the conversation between Jiang Tian and his granddaughter with a half-smile. At this time, he picked up the medicine bottle and unscrewed it. He poured out a black pill into his palm. This pill smells so bad. Could it be poisonous? The moment the pill was poured out, Rachel instantly smelled a foul odor. She could not help but cover her nose and quickly stopped him. Grandpa, don't eat it. We haven't even tested the ingredients yet. What if you eat it and hurt your body? Rachel, do you think my body can get any worse? Even if it's poisonous, what's the difference between dying now and dying 30 days later? Marshall smiled faintly. Rachel looked at Professor George and the family doctor, Anthony, hoping that they would help her. Unexpectedly, the family doctor, Anthony, did not say anything. Who would dare to poison Mr. Marshall? That would be suicide. This Wuxia kid probably wants to climb up the social ladder. At best, it's just an ineffective drug. George's eyes flickered twice, but he did not stop him. He wanted to give Jiang Tian a good blow and taunt after the pill was ineffective. Damn it, it would be best if Marshall was eaten to death. Then, the Marshall family would send this Wuxia doctor to prison. Life imprisonment. This kid is too infuriating. Marshall popped the pill into his mouth, took a bottle of mineral water from the maid, and drank it. After Mr. Marshall took the pill, the entire terrace was filled with an eerie silence. In the manor, the sound of music and laughter on the lawn could be heard from afar. It was so faint that it seemed to be in another world. Everyone stared at Marshall in silence, as if waiting for something to happen. 1 minute, 2 minutes, time passed slowly. However, 5 minutes had passed, and there was no obvious change in Marshall. Mike shook his head helplessly and whispered, "He's just a liar. Do you really think there will be a miracle?" Ouch, my stomach hurts. At this time, Marshall suddenly clutched his stomach and screamed. He was in so much pain that his whole body convulsed. Large drops of sweat seeped out of his head, and the blood vessels on his forehead throbbed. He even opened his mouth wide and panted heavily, as if he was about to fail. Suddenly, everyone became nervous. Chapter 617. Mr. Marshall, what's wrong? The family doctor, Anthony, walked over nervously and examined Marshall. There's something wrong with this pill. Damn Wuxia, you'll have to take responsibility. Professor George stood up and pointed at Jiang Tian. You're finished. The Marshall family will sue you. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Pyrese, who is he? You've killed my grandfather. Rachel was flustered and exasperated. She rushed in front of Jiang Tian and Paris and shouted angrily. I need to go to the toilet. Suddenly Marshall stood up with difficulty. Then he walked faster and faster. He was sweating profusely as he ran to the toilet. Ah! At this moment, Rachel was stunned. She said in disbelief, Did Grandpa stand up just now? He's been in a wheelchair for half a year and has never stood up successfully. Before a person dies, their mental and physical strength will have some extreme reactions. Professor George said worriedly. The family doctor, Anthony, was nervous. He ordered a few assistants. Move the equipment to Mr. Marshall's bedroom immediately. I want to give him a full checkup. The assistants quickly got ready. They knocked on the door and entered Marshall's bedroom. The family doctor, Anthony, stepped forward and asked, Mr. Marshall, how do you feel? I had diarrhea, but it's strange. I feel relaxed now. The pain has disappeared. Marshall's face was filled with ecstasy and amazement as he said, I feel like I'm completely healed. Mr. Marshall, I want to give you a full checkup. Anthony requested. No need. I can feel that I've completely recovered. Marshall walked to the door. He wanted to go to the rooftop and thank the miracle doctor, Wuxia, who had cured him. No, to be cautious, I think we still need to do a thorough checkup. Professor George did not give up. All right. Marshall was helpless. He could only let them examine him. In fact, he was also curious about the current situation. He had to admit that America's medical equipment was much more advanced than Wuxia's. X-ray, MRI, blood analysis, infrared sensors, and other equipment were all portable. Moreover, they were quickly analyzed by computers, and the results were almost all produced within a few minutes. He even saw a test strip for cancer cells that could analyze the number of cancer cells just by extracting a drop of blood. However, Wuxia's TCM doctors could make accurate judgments with just a few fingers. To be able to cure diseases with the simplest materials such as plants, stones, and silver needles, wasn't this a civilization that was even more advanced and closer to the cultivation world? Soon the first test result came out. Anthony, the family doctor, was staring at the computer screen. His face was full of surprise as he muttered softly, The amount of hemoglobin is actually normal. He then dragged the mouse and clicked a few times in a row. The more he looked, the more his face changed. The swelling of the spleen and lymph nodes has also disappeared. And, how is this possible? What? Has Mr. Marshall's condition worsened? Professor George walked over and said with slight anger, a nameless Wuxia kid relied on his relationship with the Hilton family to gain fame by deceiving the world. No, Professor George, come over and take a look. Anthony, the family doctor, hurriedly interrupted when he heard the other party's angry words. He turned the computer around and gave up his seat. This information must be preserved well. It will be the most powerful evidence in court. Professor George lowered his head and took a look. However, after just one glance, his expression was the same as that of the family doctor, Anthony. His eyes suddenly widened. How is this possible? He flipped to the second page. It's actually page 3. How is this possible? Page 4. Oh my God! His face was full of shock and disbelief. His hands did not stop moving as he clicked the mouse quickly. Soon he finished reading more than a dozen examination indicators. Professor George's eyes almost fell to the ground. He was full of disbelief. How is this possible? The cancer cells have all disappeared. The shadow of the tumor is gone. All the indicators are healthier than a healthy person. Yes, at least from the examination, Mr. Marshall is completely cured. But it's only been less than 10 minutes. What kind of medicine would have such a good effect? Anthony, the family doctor, was stunned. This doesn't make sense. Could it be that the equipment is broken? Professor George scratched his head and finally found an explanation. But it's impossible for more than a dozen instruments to break at the same time. Anthony, the family doctor, felt that Professor George's explanation was very silly. So Mr. Marshall is really cured. Professor George's face was red. He held back for a long time before he could say this. He had always been known for his rigor, and was admired by many people. However, today, this was a slap in the face. It was painful. Clearly, this kid had only given him a smelly pill, as if he was playing with it. But he had actually cured him. Could it be that this kid's medical skills had surpassed his, or was he an alien? However, he had just humiliated and ridiculed him, saying that he was arrogant and ignorant. Fuck. If this matter were to spread, he would not be able to survive in the medical field. Professor George felt his body stiffen, as if he was constipated. Professor George, I don't think I agreed to the bet just now, right? I don't remember clearly. Anthony, the family doctor, asked nervously with cold sweat on his forehead. You agreed. Marshall, Professor George, and a few of the assistants said in unison. Damn. Why is your mouth so cheap? Why did you agree to this bet? I really don't want to eat it. Can I go home first? Anthony, the family doctor, felt his head swell. He wanted to slap himself a few times. All right, Anthony, I don't think Mr. Jiang will be so stingy. Let's not keep our guests waiting. Mr. Marshall patted him on the shoulder and strode out of the door. Mr. Marshall, how can you be so sure? You don't even know him. Anthony wanted to cry. No, in fact, we all know him. Mr. Marshall's lips curled into a mysterious smile as he said calmly. To the people on the balcony, the 30-minute examination seemed very long and torturous. Everyone was extremely nervous. God bless, I hope Mr. Marshall is fine. He is my angel investor. Without him, I wouldn't be where I am now. Has Mr. Marshall's will been written? Who is the successor? This Dr. Wuxia is too despicable. If Mr. Marshall's condition worsens, I will definitely send him to federal prison. They are here. Seeing Mr. Marshall striding over, everyone stood up in a daze. Grandpa, how are you feeling? Rachel went up and grabbed his hand as she asked nervously. She did not forget to glare coldly at Jiang Tian. The reason why she did not follow them down was because she was worried that Jiang Tian would run away and escape responsibility. But this kid did not have any intention of leaving. He was chatting happily with Paris as if no one was around. He was really ruthless in order to attract her attention. Now he still did not admit that he was a liar and a quack. Was he not afraid that she would break his legs? I'm fine. Mr. Marshall smiled. Grandpa, what did you say? Rachel suspected that she was hallucinating. Fine? What do you mean? Everyone was dumbfounded and could not believe it. Mr. Marshall has recovered. He was treated by this great Dr. Wuxia with traditional Chinese medicine. Professor George and Anthony bowed respectfully to Jiang Tian to show their highest respect. Let me tell you, my lawyer has already prepared the indictment. Mike was still pointing at Jiang Tian to threaten him when he suddenly saw this scene and was shocked. He fell to the ground with a thud. How is this possible? Rachel could not believe it. She rolled up her grandpa's trousers and was even more shocked. How is this possible? She screamed. She found that the redness and spots on the joints had all disappeared. The shrunken muscles were like balloons that had been blown up and were filled with healthy, rosy muscles. He is really fine. This Dr. Wuxia's medical skills are really amazing. This is the test result. Anthony gave Jiang Tian a thumbs up. His face was full of admiration, respect, flattery, and flattery. He also sent out copies of the test results in advance to everyone to endorse Jiang Tian's amazing medical skills. He was really afraid that Jiang Tian would mention the matter of eating shit again. Look, my attitude when I admit my mistake is very good. Let me go. This is a miracle. No, miracle is not enough to describe it. This is a miracle. In fact, everyone did not need to look at the test results to gradually feel the earth-shaking changes in Marshall. His originally haggard and pale face became rosy and healthy. His originally weak voice became full of vigor. Even his dim eyes became sparkling and his hunched back straightened. Is he really fine? Looking at the test results, Rachel's little face was first filled with disbelief, then shock, and she had to believe it. His medical skills are actually so amazing. Looking up and seeing Jiang Tian's half-smile, Rachel's little face suddenly turned red. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Previously, she had been ridiculing him for having no medical knowledge, saying that he was fishing for fame and wanted to chase him out. However, he actually cured her grandpa's leukemia in 10 minutes. Is he really fine? This test can't be wrong, right? Holding the test results with trembling hands, Mike's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Cancer and the most difficult to treat lymphatic leukemia, late stage, cured in 10 minutes? Motherfucker, this is too heaven-defying. Is he even human? Chapter 6:18. Mike looked at the checklist for a long time before he raised his head and looked at Jiang Tian in disbelief. Then, he rubbed his eyes and was shocked. The situation is not good. Why is Rachel chatting with him? Her eyes are full of admiration and her smile is so bright. Rachel has never treated any young talent like this before. Oh my God. She even kissed his cheek. Not good. She took out her phone. Is she leaving her contact number? She even made an appointment? Mike immediately felt his head turn green, and a sense of danger surged in his heart. This is not good. This is not good. However, Mike also had his own advantages. After thinking about it in his heart, he quickly walked up and raised his wine glass towards Jiang Tian and smiled. Mr. Jiang, your medicine is very valuable. Why don't I invest in you? The first investment is $100 million. I only need 20% of the shares. His manners were elegant, but he was superior and had a sense of superiority. Mike thought that this offer was very tempting. It was equivalent to giving the other party a valuation of $500 million, or 4 billion Wuxia yuan. It was much more than many internet companies. He had two purposes for doing this. One was to show Rachel his wealth. He has medical skills, but I am an internet entrepreneur. The other was to force Jiang Tian to bow down. When entrepreneurs met venture capitalists, which one of them would not bow down to them, as if they had met the god of fortune? Thank you, but I don't need it. Jiang Tian was very busy. A group of people surrounded him and chatted. They flattered him and did not have the time to talk to him. Mike, do you think a person like Mr. Jiang who does not care about fame and fortune will care about money? Another tycoon said righteously. We, Pfizer, are willing to invest $1 billion and only need 20% of the shares. Mike was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Brother, I didn't do anything to you, right? How can you undermine me like this? Can't you see that I just want to show off in peace? I'm sorry, I really don't need it. Jiang Tian frowned and said to the tycoon, Mr. Jiang, is your product unable to be mass-produced? Or are there any side effects? If that's the case, it's very regrettable. Mike was stunned at first, then he smiled reservedly and hit the nail on the head. If you can't mass-produce, you'll still be poor. Even if you were to sell 1 pill a day, how much could you sell it for? Not every tycoon had cancer. Most of the patients were ordinary people. They still needed to mass-produce it for them. If there were side effects, it would be even more troublesome. Maybe the Marshall family will keep you. Even if there are no side effects, it can be mass-produced. But I don't need investors. Jiang Tian glared at him. Does this person know how to speak? The Medicine King Group's cash flow was abundant. It was a veritable unicorn and cash cow. There was no need for financing or listing. Now that it's finally delisted, I'm still giving you shares? You're dreaming. Too lazy to pay attention to him. Jiang Tian turned his head and continued to discuss with Rachel the differences between Chinese and Western cultures, the interesting things about college life, and the magic of Chinese medicine. Seeing this, Mike was so angry that his nose became crooked. He frowned and said, Mr. Jiang, products are products, and operations are operations. A good product might not necessarily be able to make money. There's a lot to learn about this. For example, Mike, that's enough. Seeing that he was still blabbering on, Paris frowned and said impatiently, I'm not going to tell you anything. Mr. Jiang is the only heir to Wuxia's Medicine King Group. South Korea's Daewoo Pharmaceutical is also one of his assets. Actually, she had good intentions. Jiang Tian was a malefic star. Someone who could slaughter entire cities and wipe out entire clans at the slightest provocation. He was an existence that could defeat an army of 10,000. If Mike continued to pester him, Jiang Tian might kill him out of anger, and he would not even know how he died. After Chun Fan said that, the entire room went silent. Everyone looked at the young man in front of them in shock. They felt like they were looking at a monster. Medicine King Group, Daewoo Pharmaceutical. They were the biggest pharmaceutical companies in East Asia. Even though they were far away, they had heard of them. His assets should be about 400 billion Wuxia, which is equivalent to 60 billion US dollars. Most of the tycoons in the room were worth less than that. As for Facebook's Mike, his shares in Facebook were no more than 6 billion US dollars. This Mr. Jiang from Wuxia is rich, handsome, and has excellent medical skills. He's perfect. Mike, who had been trying his best to outperform Jiang Tian, suddenly felt a burning pain in his chest. He stood there, stunned. His body was shaking violently, and he wanted to cry. Shit. His personal wealth is 10 times more than mine. If I knew this would happen, I would not have acted so pretentious. Now not only did I fail to act pretentious, I became a fool. Where's the crack in the floor? Why is the floor so perfect? There's not even a crack in the floor. I want to crawl into it. Who would have thought that this was only Jiang Tianming's assets? The assets he got from Nanyang's Guo family and Yin Jin's Bai family had never been shown to the public. He is the heir to Medicine King Group. He defeated Korea's top miracle doctor, Park Yung-tae, and defeated Dr. Jiang. Oh, I remember now. No wonder his medical skills are so good. Professor George and Anthony were both excited. It was as if they had seen a god. That's right, it's me, Jiang Tian said with a smile. Medicine King Group wants to expand into the American market. Please help us. Of course, of course. This is our honor. The two of them nodded in agreement. Dr. Jiang, this is my son. He is an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School. His academic skills are good. Dr. Jiang, please be his teacher and teach him some Chinese medicine skills. Seeing that Jiang Tian seemed to be in a good mood, Anthony pulled a young assistant over and said tentatively, "As long as you are willing to accept him, I can also be your student. Think about it. All the tenured professors and assistant professors in Harvard will become your students. I guarantee that you will be famous. Your products will also be promoted in the United States soon." Professor Anthony, how shameless can you be? You want to buy one, get one free? Professor George strode forward and reprimanded sternly. What's wrong? Dr. Jiang, ignore him. This person has always been unruly. Look at me, cough cough. I am the chairman of the Nobel Prize in Medicine. I also want to be your student. He lowered his voice and said mysteriously, "My position is very beneficial to the promotion of Chinese medicine. Actually, you may not know that the Nobel Prize evaluation is very cliquish. What's there to fight about? You are all in your 60s and 70s, old enough to be his grandfather. You are all muddle-headed, yet you still want to be his disciple. Do you still want your dignity?" Rachel was furious. She did not expect that her mentor and idol would be so humble. Professor George and Anthony blushed when they were mocked by Rachel. Indeed, they were too old, and their academic research had stopped. They were basically living off their savings. It was unrealistic for them to have any achievements in Chinese medicine. Everyone gave Rachel a thumbs up and silently praised her. See that? Miss Rachel is still the one with courage, vision, and grace. She saw the problem at a glance. But who knew that before they finished praising Jiang Tian, Rachel shamelessly moved to Jiang Tian's side and held onto his arm as she said with a fawning smile, "Professor Jiang, look at me. I'm still very young, only 18 years old. Can I be your disciple? Also, the United States is very open. It has never prohibited student-teacher relationships." Everyone was speechless. Where was the bottom line? Where was the bottom line? Jiang Tian smiled and said, "We'll talk about it later. I rarely accept disciples." I suddenly feel that Rachel and Mr. Jiang are very compatible. The silver-haired old butler whispered in Marshall's ear. They're not compatible. Rachel doesn't deserve him. I'm afraid Rachel will have to work hard to pursue him. Mr. Marshall shook his head gently. His deep eyes shone brightly. He was more and more convinced of his deduction. Seeing this scene, Mike was suddenly shocked. He clenched his fists tightly and secretly swore in his heart. Damn it. No, I'm going to be dumped by Rachel. I have to go to Las Vegas and find a few ruthless people from the Big Circle gang and the Vietnam gang to threaten her. Humph, so what if his medical skills are good and he's rich? This is the United States after all. He'll definitely run away in fear. At this time, Marshall stepped forward and smiled. Mr. Jiang, actually, you and Iris don't have to hide your honorable identity. These are my best allies and the most valued juniors. They will never betray me. Mr. Marshall, is your intelligence network really that powerful? Jiang Tian shook his wine glass and smiled. Only on the dark web could there be a slightly clearer video of him. Even so, his face couldn't be seen clearly. The videos and photos circulating on the internet were very blurry. Marshall definitely couldn't recognize him. In the United States, only the top management of the Pentagon and the Langley building knew about his double identity. No, I rely on my reasoning and analysis skills. Marshall reached out his hand enthusiastically and smiled. If I'm not wrong, you are Kong Tae-chu. At this point there was no need to hide. Jiang Tian shook Marshall's hand and smiled. Sorry, because the Pentagon is watching me, I have to be careful. Clang. Mike fell down. He was Kong Tae-chu. Did he have to be so ruthless? Not only was he rich enough to rival a country, but he was also a terrifying existence that could defeat tens of thousands of soldiers and control the political situation in Sidoni. He wanted to threaten him just now, but fortunately he didn't. Otherwise he would probably tear down Facebook and even the entire Silicon Valley and San Francisco. You are Kong Tae-chu. Rachel's beautiful eyes widened in surprise and joy. She didn't expect her idol to come to her manor. It was like a dream. But the next moment, she was so angry that she was dancing. Iris, damn it. Why didn't you tell me earlier? You got me into trouble. Do you still want to be his girlfriend? But he's really married and their relationship is very good. Iris smiled mockingly. Who told you to say that I'm big-breasted but brainless? You're finally brainless for once. If he's not married, I definitely won't have a chance. Rachel's face was full of melancholy. She regretted leaving such a bad impression on her idol. Chapter 619. Mr. Jiang, let's talk in my study. Marshall invited him with a smile. Sure. Jiang Tian gladly agreed. Excuse me, everyone. Rachel, help me entertain everyone. Marshall politely apologized to everyone, then accompanied Jiang Tian into his study. Only Iris could accompany him. The other tycoons had no right to do so. In terms of wealth and influence, Jiang Tian, as the king of Sidoni, could even overwhelm Marshall. Among the many people present, only Marshall had the right to speak to Jiang Tian as an equal. The others were too far behind. Mr. Jiang, thank you very much for curing my leukemia. There's an old saying in Wuxia, return the favor. Is there anything I can do for you, Mr. Jiang? Marshall was swift and decisive. He went straight to the point and asked with a smile. On the battlefield in Sidoni, I killed Thorpe and the professor from Blue Storm. You should know that he was supported by the Pentagon and the CIA. Jiang Tian smiled. I think they might make a move against me. To be exact, I'm not worried about them making a move against me. They can't do anything to me. But I and my assets are preparing to move to Sidoni. I'm worried that the people of Sidoni will be attacked by America. After all, America has always liked to start local wars. You're planning to move to Sidoni. You are worried about the safety of the people of Sidoni? Marshall couldn't help but feel deep respect for Jiang Tian. Yes, I hope that I can bring freedom and well-being to the people of Sidoni, not bring disaster to them. Jiang Tian nodded. But it's obvious that the politicians in the Pentagon and Langley building won't agree. They're just a bunch of mobs. Marshall shook his head in disdain. Giving freedom to others and protecting your own freedom are both noble causes. Marshall uttered a famous quote from President Lincoln and sighed deeply. And in order to obtain freedom, we must break the shackles. But ironically, the shackles of the Sidoni people were imposed by the superpowers such as the United States and the United Kingdom, which advocated freedom and democracy. He took a deep breath and said emotionally, Mr. Jiang, I admire your character, your actions, and even your ideals and beliefs. I am willing to support you. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Jiang Tian nodded. I can guarantee that the United States will not launch any military operations against Sidoni for at least a year. Marshall laughed heartily and said, yes. The MPs and judges under my control will make those bastards in the Pentagon and Langley building lose face. 1 year is enough. Jiang Tian stood up and shook hands with Marshall. He said solemnly, I thank you on behalf of the suffering people of Sidoni. Then Jiang Tian introduced his idea of building Sidoni and the longevity industry to Marshall. Marshall was very interested, and he immediately said, Mr. Jiang, if you need construction funds, the entire Marshall family will help you with everything we have. Also, I hope that my family can obtain a permanent residency certificate and become the first batch of immigrants to invest in Sidoni. Why not? Jiang Tian smiled and said, This is also an honor for me and the people of Sidoni. This secret meeting lasted for a full hour. The atmosphere was very harmonious, and both sides reached a consensus on many aspects. After the meeting, although Marshall tried to persuade Jiang Tian to stay, he still insisted on leaving. As for how Marshall would deal with the politicians in the Langley building and the Pentagon, Jiang Tian did not care. Marshall was the real elite of the United States. He had a very deep foundation and connections. He had representatives in Congress and the courts. He could surpass the restrictions of the United States laws and rules, or rather, he could play with the United States laws and rules. He had his own means. When he returned to China, Jiang Tian did not choose to take a plane. Instead, he took a cruise ship of the Hilton family and set off from San Francisco to Tianjin Port, which was adjacent to Beijing, Wuxia. Fortresses are always breached from the inside. The hawkish generals and politicians in the Pentagon and Langley building may not realize that a force that is enough to cut off their political careers has been formed. When they are in disarray, I will be able to carry out my great migration and build up Sidoni in a hurry. On this day, Jiang Tian was lying on a deck chair, comfortably enjoying the warm sea breeze of the Pacific Ocean. He sipped freshly squeezed juice and basked in the sun, thinking leisurely. This meeting with the Marshall family was very fruitful. In addition to forming an alliance with the Marshall family to form a force to clamp down on the Pentagon and Langley building, Jiang Tian also left dozens of jade talismans and a large number of pills for the Marshall family. The cost of these things was only a few 100,000 yuan. But the effect was amazing. At least they could see the tip of the iceberg of Sidoni's longevity industry. The temptation of health, longevity, and even immortality was something that even immortals could not resist, let alone ordinary humans. Presumably, the Marshall family would be able to win over a large number of supporters, and even attract them to migrate to Sidoni. Mr. Jiang, the Hawaiian Islands are in front of us. Do you want to go sightseeing? A handsome captain walked up to Jiang Tian and respectfully bowed and suggested. The Hawaiian Islands? Jiang Tian was slightly taken aback and looked up. He saw a lush island in the sky. 8 large islands and 124 small islands dotted the sea like stars in the sky. Modern skyscrapers and villas complemented the tropical forest. Oh right. Jiang Tian suddenly thought of something and frowned. I heard from Yi Zhantian that the base of the Big Circle Gang, Big Turtle Island, is in this area, right? Before this, Jiang Tian didn't even care about the Big Circle Gang. They only had a few thousand private soldiers and a few transcendent grandmasters. Jiang Tian could easily wipe them out. Jiang Tian didn't even need to do anything. Huaqing Tian was more than enough to deal with them. But things were different now. Saroni had a lot of things to do. He lacked both money and labor. You guys keep going, I will be back soon. Jiang Tian cracked a smile and waved his right hand. A giant black sword floated in the air. Shoo! Jiang Tian took a step forward, and with a shake of his body, the flying sword and him suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, he reappeared a few kilometers away. He can fly. He really is an immortal. The captain's body trembled and his eyes almost popped out of his head. Before they departed, Perels had told him that Mr. Jiang was a real immortal, and that he should respect him. However, the captain didn't take it to heart. Mysterious culture was popular in the East, but it was nothing more than a backward superstition. It seemed that Perels had been fooled by this Wuxia kid. Along the way, Jiang Tian didn't use any divine powers. He either sat cross-legged or read a book under the sun. He looked just like an ordinary tourist. This made the captain even more certain of his judgment. After seeing this shocking scene, the captain realized that Perels was right. Jiang Tian stepped on the flying sword and flew a few hundred meters into the air. He covered the islands of different sizes with his divine sense. These islands were beautiful. On the golden beaches, coconut trees swayed gently and seagulls soared in the sky. There were many tourists swimming and surfing in the shallow waters. The largest island was only 30 miles in radius. Jiang Tian could cover it with his divine sense. Of course, Jiang Tian already knew that Big Turtle Island was not a large island. It was a small island, which made it easier for him to find it. Here it is. Jiang Tian soon found a small island with a radius of 5 to 6 kilometers, dozens of kilometers to the north of the Hawaiian Islands. There were many bunkers and sentry posts of different sizes on the island. There were thousands of private soldiers patrolling and guarding. A 100-meter-tall mountain was almost hollowed out. It was a very sturdy fortification. Looking at their nondescript uniforms, Jiang Tian immediately determined that this was Big Turtle Island. He flew over without saying anything. Most of these private soldiers were Chinese, and many of them were even retired Chinese soldiers. Jiang Tian was too lazy to kill them. He only needed to kill the leader, 6th Old Man Fan, to intimidate the others. After using an invisibility talisman on himself, Jiang Tian turned into a shadow and rushed toward the mountain. At this moment, in an extremely sturdy fortification hidden in the mountain, a large meeting room was brightly lit. 6th Old Man Fan and many other big shots of the Big Circle Gang sat around an old man. This old man was wearing an old green robe. He had a thin face and looked like an academic master from the Republic of China. However, when his eyes opened and closed, a bright light shot out. His aura was as deep as the sea and abnormally powerful. Grandmaster Situ, your visit to a small place like Great Turtle Island, the headquarters of the Great Circle, really brings light to our humble dwelling. 6th Old Man Fan slapped the armrest of the chair and laughed. From now on, we have finally found a powerful backer. Well said, the Chinese of the world are one family. Master Situ smiled and said, you have made the right choice. Now that the Hong sect has reappeared, all the tycoons in the world are overjoyed. Even the Bai family of Yanjin has joined the Hong sect. The Bai family of Yanjin? Bai Tianlei and Hao Hongmei are the leaders of the 6 martial arts sects of Yanjin? Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and said in shock. Yes. When Yi Tianren was at war with the Hong sect, Bai Tianlei was the mediator. The Hong sect is also a member of the Hong sect. Master Situ nodded proudly and then said, over the years, you have managed to amass a few $100 billion worth of assets under the watchful eyes of the Americans. Although he was smiling, his tone was haughty, like a teacher praising an elementary school student. It is my honor to have Master Situ's approval. 6th Old Man Fan's smile widened, as if he had just received a huge compliment. From now on, we will donate 30% of our annual profits to the Hong sect and 5% to Mr. Situ. Although 5% didn't sound like a lot, it was still a sizable sum considering the Big Circle Gang's annual profits of over $10 billion. However, Master Situ didn't seem to care. He cracked a smile and said, us cultivators are not interested in worldly wealth. We don't bring it with us when we are born, and we don't take it with us when we die. Chapter 620. I know. If I had only prepared these items, it would be an insult to Mr. Situ's reputation. 6th Old Man Fan laughed and gave Chen Yang, the head of the Great Circle of North America. Chen Yang walked out of the room and took out a box made of yellow rosewood. The box was made of extraordinary material, and the carvings were exquisite. It was wrapped in a thick layer of paste and looked like an antique. The value of the box was already extraordinary, and the value of the item inside was even more immeasurable. What a powerful surge of spirit chi. Open it. Mr. Situ's eyes lit up. Please take a look, Mr. Situ. Sixth Old Man Fan opened the box and took out a small red gourd. The gourd was small but exquisite. It looked like two pigeon eggs connected to each other. However, the surface of the gourd was covered with strange patterns that exuded a natural charm. Huh? These patterns look like Tao inscriptions. What is it? Master Situ was taken aback by the gourd's appearance. Master Situ, this gourd is not an ordinary gourd. It was stolen from Wei Xuegong's house when I exterminated his family. I heard that a Dharma spell master from Southeast Asia offered 300 million Wuxia dollars for it. Sixth Old Man Fan said. Good. It must be a treasure. Master Situ praised the gourd excitedly. Even I can't control this small gourd. If I gave it to the ancestral master, he would be very pleased. Perhaps the next leader of the Hong Triad would be him. As long as you like it, Mr. Situ, I have another treasure vault. You can take your pick after the meeting. Sixth Old Man Fan slapped the armrest of the chair and laughed. If there was an overlord who had been in the underground world for many years, he would have been shocked. The Hong sect, which had been banished by Heavenly Yi Run before the founding of the People's Republic of China for decades, had resurfaced and taken over a large group of companies with hundreds of billions of dollars in assets. However, to Sixth Old Man Fan, this was the best choice he could make. Ever since Lin Zhenyu was killed and the Great Circle and Jiang Tian became enemies, the leader of the Great Circle, Sixth Old Man Fan, had been living a nightmare. Kong Teichu massacred Jinling, killed hundreds of strong people from the Dark World, and defeated the 28-man mixed brigade of the East Sea. Every time something like this happened, Sixth Old Man Fan would be alarmed. His heart was filled with regret and fear. Am I blind? Why did I provoke such a murderous god back then? Especially recently, there was a rumor in the Dark World that Kong Teichu had killed the Professor and Zeus, broke the Wolf King's arm, and stepped on 3 powerful organizations led by the Palace of the Gods. Take control of the Sidoni regime, and become the retired Emperor of Sidoni. Sixth Old Man Fan was dumbfounded when he heard the news. Was this guy still human? He was a freak. The Palace of the Gods was backed by the Holy See and the European Union. Blue Storm was secretly supported by the Pentagon, and the Winter Soldiers was the trump card of Russia's Northern Army. Compared to the Palace of the Gods, it was no exaggeration to say that the so-called strong people of the Great Circle were just chickens and grass dogs waiting to be slaughtered. But now, Kong Teichu had even killed them. Moreover, Kong Teichu was now in control of Sidoni. This was clearly the rhythm of establishing a country. In the future, with a modern army loyal to him, he would be like a tiger that had grown wings. His strength would multiply. If Kong Teichu wanted to kill him and the Great Circle, it would be as easy as crushing an ant. For a long time, Sixth Old Man Fan was so anxious that he was going crazy. He had to drink a bottle of vodka and swallow a few sleeping pills every day before he could fall asleep. His body was getting worse by the day. Purchase weapons. Laser weapons are limited. As for tanks and the like, buy as many as you can. Strengthen the defense. Transfer all the elites of the society here. Add another 500 men. The fortifications need to be rebuilt with alloys and special cement. One order after another was passed down. However, he knew that it was only a consolation. Kong Teichu was able to defeat the 28 Japanese mixed brigades, let alone the Great Circle army. In the end, he made the decision to ally himself with the Hong sect. The Hong sect was a secret organization of the Qing dynasty. The name Hong referred to Zhu Yuanzong, and its purpose was to overthrow the Qing dynasty and restore the Ming dynasty. The Hong sect's power was unimaginable. The American branch of the Hong sect had supported Mr. Nakayama's revolutionary activities by giving him money and guns. Although the Hong sect had withdrawn from Wuxia, their influence was still concentrated in the United States and Canada. They also had many branches in Europe. Most importantly, the Hong sect had a few immortal state warriors, and even a human deity in their ranks. The Hong sect was filled with overlords. Compared to a behemoth like the Hong sect, the Great Circle, which had only been around for 50 years, was nothing. That was why Sixth Old Man Fan and many other tycoons were bowing to Mr. Situ, one of the 4 great guardians of the Hong sect. After chatting for a while, Sixth Old Man Fan asked with a smile, "Mr. Situ, How are you going to deal with Kong Taechu? You must be a half-step immortal state warrior, right? Kong Taechu. Situjia's face hardened a little when he heard the name. Then he cracked a smile and said, I am afraid that this man has already surpassed the immortal state. He is a half-step mortal deity. Half-step mortal deity. He has surpassed the immortal state. Everyone was taken aback by the development. That was an unimaginable level of attainment. An immortal state warrior could be relied on by an entire country, not to mention a half-step mortal deity. But you don't have to be afraid of him. Situjia smiled faintly and said disdainfully, as if he was holding a pearl of wisdom in his hand. This man is indeed powerful and talented, but he doesn't know how to use his own power. Dasoni is a remote place. What is there to fight for? He had killed Thorpe and other warlords, and even trampled on organizations like the Palace of the Gods. This was tantamount to destroying the existing international order. He will face the wrath of the United States of America and other superpowers. Even if he has surpassed the immortal state and is made of steel, he is no match for the superpowers. Everyone nodded in agreement after hearing his analysis. Many years ago, the United States of America and other superpowers had suppressed immortal state warriors with nuclear weapons. Until now, many immortal state warriors had either gone into hiding or cooperated with the government. However, no one dared to provoke the superpowers. I bet Kong Taechu is having a headache right now. Sidoni is a hot potato. Black Ape Carl, the head of the African region, said with a smirk. He has already made himself known as the king of the underworld. If he loses Sidoni, he will be laughed at by many overlords. But if he does, he will face a lot of pressure. Although the United States of America will put some pressure on Kong Taechu, it will only distract him. Xiao Wu, the head of the North America region, said worriedly, I think we still need the Hong sect to intimidate him. Situjia nodded and said, That's exactly why I'm here. In a few months, the ancestral master of the Hong sect will come out of seclusion and hold a grand ceremony to declare war on Jiang Taichu. What? The ancestral master of the Hong sect is still alive? How is that possible? He is from the late Qing dynasty. Everyone's faces were filled with shock, and some were filled with ecstasy. Do you think I am lying to you? Situjia gave them a disdainful glance and snorted in his mind. A bunch of ignorant fools. The ancestral master has the blood coagulation mystic art, which is comparable to the most advanced hibernation technology. How can the likes of you be able to fathom the abilities of that old man? He is going to declare war on Kong Taechu? Sixth old man fan slapped his thigh and burst into laughter. This is great. If the ancestor comes out of seclusion, wouldn't that little kid Jiang Taichu be scared to the point of wetting his pants? Even as everyone was laughing, a faint voice drifted into their ears. Are you talking about me? The owner of the voice seemed to be at least a few kilometers away. But then clank. The special alloy gate, which was custom-made from Rothschild Military Industrial Company, and was more than 20 centimeters thick and could withstand cannons, was punched open from the outside. The huge metal pieces flew in all directions, and the guards on both sides of the gate were immediately turned into a bloody mist. Who is it? There's an expert. Everyone's expression changed drastically as they stood up and looked towards the door. A black-haired, black-eyed young man in casual clothes walked in lazily. Kong Taechu. Sixth old man fan gasped as if he had seen a ghost. His knees buckled and he almost fell to the ground. Inside a luxurious cabin on the Princess Paris. Paris was sitting in front of her desk, her slender fingers typing rapidly on the keyboard of her Apple PC. Her hair was tied up high, and she wore a pair of black-rimmed anti-blue glasses. Her shirt was snow-white, and she wore a pencil skirt and black stockings. Her beautiful feet stepped on the Persian cashmere carpet, and her toes, which were dyed pink with Lancome fingernail polish, moved playfully in her stockings. At this moment, she finally showed her capable and astute side. Now she was Jiang Tianyu's consultant and his agent in the United States. She was in charge of collecting and analyzing intelligence, dividing the enemy's factions, and giving strategic advice. In short, she was Sidoni's Kerberg or the CIA. Suddenly someone knocked on the door. Under Jenny's lead, A middle-aged man who looked smart and capable walked in. "Where is Mr. Jiang?" He was Paris's former colleague in the CIA. He was a senior military intelligence analyst with the rank of colonel. After he received a pill to cure his daughter's terminal illness, he decided to work for Jiang Tian. He was Paris's right-hand man. "He is going to kill someone." Paris smiled smugly and said, "I just heard from Captain Jack that he is going to visit the Great Turtle Island of the Great Circle. If I am not mistaken, the Great Circle is going to be removed from the Great Circle." "Shit." The middle-aged man slapped his thigh and said, "I just got the news that one of the 4 elders of the Hong sect, Situjia, has arrived at the Great Turtle Island of the Great Circle. He is half a step away from immortal state, and he has brought along his eldest disciple, the #1 mixed martial arts master, Tiger. The Great Circle and the Hong sect are going to work together to target Kong Teichu." Chapter 621. What? Paris was startled as a worried look appeared on her face. She didn't even bother to put on her shoes as she dashed out of the door toward the landing pad on the deck. Has she lost her mind? Jenny and the former CIA Colonel Royce White looked at each other and chased after her helplessly. Meanwhile, at the base on Big Turtle Island, Kong Teichu, 6th old man Fan screamed as soon as he saw Jiang Tian. He was so frightened that he almost knelt on the ground. "How dare you call me by my name? You've tried to provoke me twice and exposed my information on the dark web. Do you deserve to die?" Jiang Tian smirked. "Well, didn't you ask Shu Wei from Battle Dragon to tell me that you wouldn't kill me?" 6th old man Fan's heart raced as he trembled in fear. What should come still came. If Jiang Tian wanted to kill him, who could stop him? He was someone who could fight an army head-on. "I was just joking with you. How could you take it seriously? What a joke. Besides, when I was sent to Japan, you offered a second reward to kill the Heavenly Alliance." Jiang Tian said coldly. "Kill yourself and I'll leave your body intact. How dare you? How dare you disrespect 6th old man Fan? Die." Black Ape Carl didn't believe it. He roared as he stomped on the ground, cracking the granite floor. Energy surged up from the ground as he charged at Jiang Tian like a black tornado. Black Ape Carl was the leader of the African continent, and the descendant of a mysterious old priest in the African jungle. He had awakened his power, and could control the energy of the earth. He could even smash an armored vehicle with one punch. Jiang Tian was famous, but Black Ape Carl didn't believe him. How could he reach the immortal state at such a young age? He wanted to test Jiang Tian's power. If he could kill Jiang Tian, he would use him as a stepping stone for his own rise. Black Ape Carl's fist smashed down, containing a berserk power. Instantly, a sonic boom rang out, tearing through the air. A faint shadow of a fist rippled out from the tip of the fist, and circles of air rippled out in all directions. Seeing this, even Situjia was amazed, but he shook his head lightly. Black Ape Carl was indeed very strong. He was comparable to a fighting master. For Fan Liuji to have such a powerful subordinate, it was no wonder that the Great Circle had been developing so well all these years. However, the difference between him and Kong Teichu was too great. He would most likely be defeated within 3 moves. Die. But how could Jiang Tian use a second move? His jade-white palm casually struck out. There was a loud rumble. The 7th metal true essence, like a monstrous wave, blasted out. Whoosh. Black Ape Carl disappeared from where he stood. With a loud boom, he was sent flying more than 10 meters away, crashing into a granite wall. He blasted a human-shaped dent in the wall, and embedded himself in it. His body was badly mutilated. His mouth was open and blood was spurting out from his mouth along with pieces of his heart and lungs. He couldn't be more dead. So powerful. I finally understand why he was able to rise so powerfully, and become known as the #1 expert in Wuxia. Situjia stared at Jiang Tian as a light flickered in his eyes. There was a hint of disbelief, a hint of fear, and a hint of amazement in his eyes. How is that possible? Is this the power of an immortal state warrior? The others also found it hard to believe. Black Ape Carl was one of the most powerful figures in the Great Circle. Even though he was not as powerful as Jiang Tian, he should be able to hold his own for a while. But who would have thought that Jiang Tian would be able to end the battle so easily, in less than a second? This was simply an instant kill in reality. Today I will only kill Fan Liuji. It has nothing to do with anyone else. If you want to live, you will have to kneel and surrender in 3 seconds. Otherwise you will die. Jiang Tian didn't even look at Situjia. Instead he scanned the crowd and said coldly, the ancestral master of the Hong sect might be able to defeat him. However, Situjia was only half a step away from the immortal state. Therefore he had no choice but to die as far as he could. Grandmaster Jiang, we submit. We are willing to renounce the darkness and seek the light. We only ask that Grandmaster Jiang spare our lives. Plop. Other than Little Five, the other big shots and people in charge of the big circle all knelt on the ground, kowtowing and begging for mercy. Jiang Tian looked at Little Five in surprise and said coldly, "You're not kneeling. Are you not afraid of me?" "Of course I am. Of course I am." Xiao Wu's body trembled uncontrollably. However, he gritted his teeth and said, "If not for the fact that we are enemies, I would admire you and want to follow you. However, I owe my life to 6th Old Man Fan. 10 years ago, 6th Old Man Fan saved my life when I was surrounded by my enemies. You can kill me, but I will never betray 6th Old Man Fan. I have rarely seen such a stubborn person in the past few years." Jiang Tian nodded approvingly. He was impressed by Xiao Wu's character. 6th Old Man Fan's heart was filled with despair and fear when he saw his capable subordinates kneeling and begging for mercy from Jiang Tian within a second. He looked at Situjia with a pitiful expression, hoping that Situjia would say a few words for him on account of how loyal he was. "Master Kong, I am Situjia, one of the 4 elders of the Hong sect. Maybe you don't know this, but the Great Circle Group is now the Great Circle Group of the Hong sect." Situjia heaved a sigh when he saw the pleading look in 6th Old Man Fan's eyes. He walked up to Chun Fan and cupped his fists. "Master Kong, I wonder if you would spare Fan Lu's life for the sake of the Hong sect? Who do you think you are? Do you think I would spare your life?" Jiang Tian didn't even look at him. He smirked and said, "If you want to protect him, then show me your true strength. Otherwise, get out of my sight." "Master Kong, you are challenging the Hong sect. Are you not afraid of their ancestral master? Before he went into seclusion, he was already a mortal deity. He might even be an earth-level deity now." Situjia's face flushed red with anger and fear. He knew that Kong Teichu was very arrogant, but he didn't expect that he would not even give face to the Hong sect. "Hong sect? Who do you think you are? You are not worthy of my challenge. Didn't the ancestral master of the Hong sect want to fight with me? Fine, I will give him a gift." Jiang Tian snorted disdainfully. He raised his hand and unleashed a Gung Jinqi weapon. "That is your head. Arg! You dare to kill me?" Suddenly, Situjia's heart skipped a beat. He threw out a few jade talismans and dermic instruments and formed a protective aura with his true qi. These jade talismans and dermic instruments were collected by Situjia over the course of his life. Each and every one of them came from a powerful background. They were priceless and could withstand the attack of an immortal state cultivator, or even a half-step mortal deity. He would never use them unless it was absolutely necessary. But today he had used them all to block Jiang Tian's attack. Immediately, a total of 10 colorful light shields were formed, firmly protecting his entire body. Among them, there was even a soul avatar that was misty and hazy. He was tall and wore a long green robe. His appearance was strange and imposing. A long sword hung from his waist, making him look like a scholar from the Qing dynasty. His bearing was truly extraordinary and could suppress the heavens and the earth. That is the divine soul avatar of the Hong sect's ancestral master. That old man is too heaven-defying. He is too powerful. Only a human immortal would be able to refine such a heavy clone. Many people were shocked by the sight of the avatar as if they had seen a god. The divine soul avatar was not sentient, but it was alert. He swung his sword in an attempt to stop Jiang Tian's attack. "Weak. You are too weak." Jiang Tian snorted. He did not even bother to attack again. Sure enough, under Jiang Tianging's golden qi blade, all the protective shields of the magic tools and jade talismans shattered in an instant like paper. The divine soul avatar of the Hong Sek's ancestral master raised his sword to block the attack. However, the divine soul avatar was sliced in half by the Gung Jin Chi blade. The divine soul avatar spun in the air and turned into a cloud of green light particles. The avatar of Hong Sek's Gung Jin Chi blade was as fragile as paper under Jiang Tian's Gung Jin Chi blade. The Gung Jin Chi blade did not slow down and continued to coil around Situ Jie's neck. Puff! Blood spurted out as Situ Jie's head flew into the air. In his blurry consciousness, he could still see his headless corpse standing there. He must be a mortal deity. He is so powerful. Situ Jie's last bit of consciousness came back to him before he was plunged into eternal darkness. Everyone was shocked by what they had seen. Everyone was dumbfounded by what they saw. As a matter of fact, the Great Circle had been enemies with Jiang Tian for a long time. Therefore they had studied Jiang Tian thoroughly. They had been keeping a close eye on Jiang Tian's battles. However, they still did not expect Jiang Tian to be so powerful that he could even kill Situ Jie, who was half a step into the divine realm. Not to mention that he had so many Dharma artifacts, and even the divine soul avatar of Hong Sek's ancestral master. Everyone was dumbstruck. But suddenly, one of the figure's expression changed drastically. Then he ran out of the door like a cheetah or tiger. It was Situ Jie's disciple, the renowned mixed martial arts grandmaster, Tiger. Jiang Tian didn't even look at him. He didn't even lift a finger. Bang! Tiger's head exploded as yellow and white matter splattered all over the floor. His headless body fell to the ground as blood gushed out of his wounds. Master Kong, I am sorry. Please be magnanimous and spare my life. Seeing this, sixth old man Fan's body trembled uncontrollably. He knew that his death was imminent. Plop! He dropped to his knees and kowtowed to Chen Fan. Is this the sky-swallowing demonic gourd? Am I that lucky? After killing Situ Jie and the other two, Jiang Tian didn't pay any attention to the others. Instead, he focused his attention on the red gourd on the table. He scanned the gourd with his divine will and his face changed color. His divine will had devoured a few Japanese shikigami and the soul energy of the most powerful psychic adept in the world, Professor Sidoni. His divine will was like a bottomless abyss that could penetrate anything within 100 miles. It could even penetrate a special alloy that was half a meter thick. However, Jiang Tian's divine will couldn't penetrate the gourd at all. Instead, it felt like there was a repulsive force that made the golden lake in his forehead ripple. In fact, when Jiang Tian entered the room, he had already thought that the gourd might be the sky-swallowing demonic gourd. However, he wasn't sure at the time. Now that he had scanned it with his divine will, he was overjoyed. The sky-swallowing demonic gourd. It was considered a superior grade Dharma treasure, even in the realm of cultivation. It was much more powerful than the storage rings made with void stones. Chapter 622. This object had naturally formed spatial markings that seized the fortune of the heavens and the earth. And the space contained within it was deep and vast. The most heaven-defying thing was that once this item recognized an owner, the space within it would continue to expand as the owner refined it. Jiang Tian tried to place this gourd into his storage ring, and as expected, the red gourd remained motionless. This was the law of spatial artifacts. The higher the level of a spatial artifact, the stronger the spatial folding ability. Low-level spatial artifacts were unable to fold high-level spatial artifacts. The sky-devouring demonic gourd, on the other hand, could fold and swallow normal spatial artifacts. Normal storage bags and storage rings were no match for it. I'm rich. Looks like I'm still going to get something regardless of whether I have it or not. A mere circle actually has such heaven-defying treasures. The corners of Jiang Tian's mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. Back then, in outer space, an almighty had refined this gourd into a large-scale spatial artifact, and it had instantly swallowed a continent with a radius of tens of thousands of miles. There were also people who had refined this item into a flying artifact, using it to swallow space and compress it to the extreme, changing the curvature of space, and then spitting it out. After riding it, it could cross the sea of stars and cross the universe. This item could be said to have endless uses. How could Jiang Tian not be overjoyed? When Jiang Tian checked the small gourd, everyone was shocked. Everyone was filled with fear and trepidation. Yet they were like clay statues that didn't dare move at all, let alone flee. Seeing the smile on Jiang Tian's face, Sixth Old Man Fan's courage grew. He trembled and said, "Master Kong, I'm willing to give you all my assets. I only ask that you spare my life. I'll leave the pugilistic world and never interfere with pugilistic world matters again. I will never take revenge on you." At this moment, he was sobbing so hard that snot bubbles were coming out of his nose. At this moment, he no longer had the domineering aura of the leader of the circle. He was just an ordinary old man who was afraid of death. Seeing this, Little Five sighed and looked very disappointed. After all, Sixth Old Man Fan had lived like a prince for too long. He had long lost his courage. At this moment, Little Five sadly realized that even without Kong Te-Chu, the circle wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. If handing over the family property would allow one to retreat unscathed, would there still be anyone who would die in Jianghu? What does it matter if you hand it over or not? Today, I want to take it by force. What can you do about it? Jiang Tian tied the sky-devouring demonic gourd to his belt and walked forward slowly. He reached out his hand and grabbed the top of his head with his 5 fingers, probing his consciousness. The soul-controlling art went against the laws of nature. It consumed a lot of Xiao Chen's lifeblood quintessence. It was the same with the soul-searching technique. However, this kind of mind-touching soul-searching technique consumed very little energy. In the entire world, only Jiang Tian could use it. Little Five, you still think that he saved your life and you're still loyal to this bastard. After examining his memories, Jiang Tian suddenly sneered and used a secret technique. The air rumbled as green light particles floated out from the top of Sixth Old Man Fan's head, forming a lifelike image as if it was the most advanced 3D projection. What is this? Everyone was stunned, and Little Five even cried out in surprise. In the image, Sixth Old Man Fan, who was much younger than he was now, was talking to a middle-aged man wearing a fancy shirt. Little Five will appear at Crown Casino tonight at 8 p.m. You can kill his men, but you can't kill him. Sixth Old Man Fan's voice was faint. I still want his woman and the casinos under his control. His woman is very beautiful. The leader of the Vietnamese gang, Nguyen Tien, sneered. Sure. I only want Little Five. He's very capable, but he's too arrogant. He won't accept my recruitment. Sixth Old Man Fan sneered. If you kill him, he can only rely on me and ask me to avenge him. Whoosh! Jiang Tian released his palm, and the light particles dissipated. The image disappeared. Little Five's body froze. He stared at Sixth Old Man Fan with tears in his eyes and roared. Sixth Old Man Fan. No wonder all these years, when I asked you to kill Nguyen Tien, you always made excuses and didn't do it. No wonder when I secretly went to Crown Casino to kill him, I was stopped by that Nguyen guy. Qiao Qiao Lu Abie. Brothers, I'm sorry. Little Five howled at the sky as tears rolled down his cheeks. Little Five, I admire you. I'm doing this because I want you to be my brother. Sixth Old Man Fan waved his hand and exclaimed, trembling in fear. Brother? You're insulting the word. You're not human. Little Five took out a gun and pointed it at Sixth Old Man Fan's head. Do you think I'm a monkey? Spare me this time. Sixth Old Man Fan was still begging. However, Little Five did not say anything. Bang! He shot Sixth Old Man Fan in the head. Then he threw the gun away and walked to Jiang Tian. He kowtowed and wailed, Little Five, Little Five. Little Five is ignorant. If it wasn't for Grandmaster Jiang using his divine ability to let me know the truth, I would still be in the dark. I'm willing to become Master Kang's disciple. I'll go through fire and water, and I'll do anything for you. He already knew that Jiang Tian was the strongest person he had ever met in his life. But now, reality had proven that the sixth Master Fan he had been following so loyally was nothing more than a heartless and vicious bastard. Compared to Grandmaster Jiang, who valued friendship and righteousness, the difference was like heaven and earth. There was no comparison at all. If he still didn't follow Jiang Tian and stubbornly resisted, then he would be a fool. Get up. Jiang Tian helped him up and smiled. From now on, you're my disciple. What? Master Kong is willing to accept me as his disciple? Little Five wiped his tears. He could not believe it and was overjoyed. Yes, now you have a senior sister and a senior brother. Jiang Tian smiled faintly. The senior sister is Tang Linglong, the leader of Yuan Zhanlong. The other one is the leader of the Long Formation, Yi Zhantian. You are my third disciple. Master, please accept my kowtow. Hearing this, Little Five was so shocked that he gasped. At the same time, he felt honored and kowtowed again. Yi Zhantian is my master's disciple. From now on he will be my senior brother. Although the Great Circle was powerful, it was not as powerful as the Wuxia Long Formation. That was Huaxia's most powerful weapon. Very well. Jiang Tian calmly accepted his kowtow. Then he used his divine sense to pass on a set of cultivation techniques to him, allowing him to cultivate on his own. He noticed that Little Five's bone root was not bad. He had already reached the phenomenal stage, and he was also a loyal person. Now he needed someone to help him control the Great Circle and build up Sidoni. That was why Jiang Tian gave up on the other Great Circle leaders and put Little Five in charge. Of course, if Jiang Tian didn't find out about his relationship with Fan Lu, Jiang Tian wouldn't have let him stay. This guy was stubborn and had reached the initial stage of the transcendent state. If Chen Fan didn't kill him, he would be a huge threat in the future. After passing on the immortal will to Chen Fan, Jiang Tian smiled and asked, "Where is the Great Circle's treasure vault? Take me there." "Yes, master, please come with me." Chen Yang hurriedly bowed and said respectfully. It was half an hour later when Paris boarded the helicopter and arrived at Big Turtle Island. It was fine on the ship, but on Big Turtle Island, the stockings on her feet were torn, and there were streaks of blood on her tender feet. She even shot 3 of the soldiers who tried to stop her. She didn't get into the base until she received Little Five's order, and the soldiers retreated. She saw Jiang Tian sitting on the dragon throne, and a group of senior officials were kneeling in front of him. Little Five bowed to Jiang Tian, and seemed to be reporting something. Reyes and Jenny, who were following behind her, exclaimed in unison, Isn't this the California senator, the North American minister of the Big Circle Gang, and 6th Master Fan's most valued foster son, Gun God 5th brother? From now on, there is no Brother 5 of the Great Circle. There is only Master Kang's disciple, Chen Yang. Little Five bowed respectfully. Chen Yang was a mortal deity who had surpassed the immortal state, and was much more powerful than Lin Zhenyu. To be able to become Jiang Tian's disciple, he only felt that it was the fortune of 3 lifetimes. And smoke was rising from his ancestors' graves. Jiang Tian sat on the throne and sipped the cloud mist tea, made by Chen Yang. He said lightly, "From now on, the Great Circle of the United States is an ally of the Hilton family and the California Financial Group. If you have any problems, just go to him." "Yes, Master Kong." Paris and Reyes were shocked. They felt like they were in a dream. The Great Circle was the most powerful organization in the Chinese world. It had many powerful overlords, and even the governor of the United States didn't dare to offend it. However, Grandmaster Jiang only used less than half an hour to subdue them. This was simply like crushing dry weeds. With Chen Yang's help, Jiang Tian was very confident about the Great Circle. Jiang Tian had helped Chen Yang uncover the truth and take revenge. He also taught Chen Yang a cultivation art. Chen Yang would be loyal to him, which was more effective than the curse of ecstasy. After all, humans were emotional creatures. Chen Yang used to be the second leader of the Great Circle. In fact, the Great Circle only rose to prominence after Chen Yang joined it 10 years ago. In the beginning, the Great Circle was only involved in the arms, drugs, human trafficking and smuggling business. Chen Yang was very capable. He recruited people and expanded the Great Circle from California to the rest of the world. He invested in a lot of white businesses and helped the Great Circle gain a legal status. If Chen Yang was more ambitious, he would have already replaced the Great Circle. No one in the Great Circle disobeyed him. Therefore, Jiang Tian was very confident that Chen Yang would be in charge of the Great Circle. This is a superior grade qi nourishing pill. Take it and you will reach the peak of the transcendent state. Jiang Tian handed over a pill to Chen Yang and said, "Refine this pill according to the cultivation method I taught you. Your original Zhen Qi will not be wasted." It will all be transformed into Zhen Yuan. Yes. Chen Yang took the pill skeptically and swallowed it. Then he sat down on the ground and started to refine the pill. 15 minutes later, Chen Yang suddenly stood up. He stood up and his eyes shone brightly. Master, this elixir is too miraculous. I've broken through. Could it be that the master and disciple are putting on a show to trick us? Everyone was suspicious and couldn't believe it. Chapter 6:23. Cultivation was like sailing against the current. If you didn't advance, you would fall behind. It was extremely difficult. Even the most talented martial artists would find it difficult to make any progress even if they had countless resources. Wanting to break through in a quarter of an hour was simply like a myth or a legend. Chen Yang, give it a try. Jiang Tian knew what these people were thinking. He smiled and said, Yes, master. Yang Chen activated his martial art. He didn't try to gather his qi to form a stance, but directly threw out a punch. This punch had an earth-shattering power. Even the air was torn apart by the fist force. The air was filled with the sound of air exploding like tires. Roar! A multicolored tiger condensed on the tip of his fist and leaped out, waving its tiger claws wildly. Whoosh! 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 The claws left a few deep marks on the granite wall. Qi form. It's the sign of the peak of the transcendent state. He is as powerful as Lin Zhenyu. He can create another Lin Zhenyu in 15 minutes. Everyone was dumbfounded. They no longer doubted Jiang Tian's power. Suddenly, everyone revered Jiang Tian as if he was a god. Their impression of Jiang Tian was renewed. It was not scary to be a powerful person. What was scarier was that he could increase the power of others and create many overlords. We are willing to follow Master Kong for the rest of our lives. If you have any orders, we will do it without hesitation. Everyone knelt down as their eyes were filled with awe and admiration. They all thought that if they were recognized by Grandmaster Jiang, wouldn't they also be able to strengthen their cultivation and advance 1,000 miles in a day? Or perhaps they could stimulate their potential and become a peerless expert. If it was said that they were only afraid of Jiang Tian before, then now, they were wholeheartedly supporting and following him. Very well. Do your best. You can have as many elixirs as you want. Jiang Tian looked at the people kneeling on the ground and said lightly, I can help you reach a higher level every year. The immortal state and even beyond are just around the corner. The art of controlling subordinates was nothing more than a combination of kindness and power. Hit with a stick and then give with 3 melons and 2 dates. This kind of method was often effective and always successful. For these experts who were almost all above the transcendent state, they had almost transcended the mortal world. Worldly wealth was at their fingertips. Which one of them was not rich? His only expectation was to improve his cultivation and pry into the truth of the deity realm. And Jiang Tian had given them this opportunity, so how could they not be loyal? Please rest assured, Master Kong. We will not hesitate to sacrifice our lives for you. Everyone was excited, and their gazes became even more fervent. After I leave, except for the members of the U.S. headquarters, all of you will immediately depart for Sidoni. Jiang Tian sipped his tea and gave his orders. Contact Tang Xiaozi. He's doing infrastructure construction there. Please support and help them to ensure their safety. Especially Chen Yang. You have to become a citizen of Sidoni and become one with the locals. Do more good deeds, especially in the areas of healthcare, education, drinking water, and so on. After the Great Migration meeting, Tang Xiaozi and the other construction forces had already arrived in Sidoni with hundreds of billions in funds. He had started a construction frenzy in Sidoni. Many ports, railways, roads, commercial plazas, residential areas, military and civilian airports, and the Taoist temple on Tianqing Mountain were under construction. However, Tang Xiaozi's company had a few thousand employees, and they had no experience in overseas construction. Many of them didn't even know English. But the Great Circle Society was different. It was an international organization with hundreds of billions of dollars in funds. There were tens of thousands of members and most of them were retired soldiers. They were knowledgeable, disciplined, and skilled in all kinds of skills. They were the most suitable people to open up new land. Of course, I won't let you work for nothing. I plan to build a longevity sanatorium in Sidoni. A lot of rich people will move there, and the real estate industry will flourish. You can quickly enclose land and build real estate projects. I think the interim government of Sidoni will give you a good price. You will become one of the top real estate tycoons in Sidoni and the world. Besides, Sidoni will soon elect a president and form a cabinet and military. Qinyang. If you do well, you will be the president of Sidoni. If you do well, you can even become a major general in the army. Jiang Tian smiled. He was still using the carrot and stick approach. Jiang Tian had considered many candidates for the position of president. First, they had to have the ability, and second, they had to be loyal to him. After thinking about it, Qinyang was more suitable. After all, he used to control the Great Circle Society, the world's top Chinese organization. It was comparable to a country. Real estate tycoon? President? Air Force Major General? Qinyang and the others were overjoyed. They couldn't believe it. No matter how rich the Great Circle Society was, it was just an organization that walked on the edge of the law. Many of their businesses were between illegal and legal, and were monitored by the judicial departments of various countries. Last year, several middle-level managers were arrested by the U.S. Department of Justice. They were like rats hiding in the dark. However, it was different now. Everyone had many choices. Whether they were real estate tycoons, presidents, or generals, they could all walk on the surface and have a bright future. It was much better than being in the Great Circle Society. Master, let's get ready and set off. Qinyang couldn't wait to be the president. It was so exciting. Okay. Get busy. I should go to Wuxia. I think they are almost done with the preparations. At this time, the Great Circle Society's heavenly materials and earthly treasures had been packed and transported to the Princess Paris. Jiang Tian got up and walked out of the defense base leisurely. He boarded the ship and left. When Jiang Tian set foot in the U.S. and met with Marshall, the Heaven Alliance was not idle. After the Great Migration meeting, Zhang Qinzhen submitted his resignation to the Government Affairs Council. Fortunately, Zhang Qinzhen had only been the chairman of the military-industrial group for a few months. His tenure was short. Moreover, Cao Shixiang tried his best to persuade him that the establishment of Sidoni was more beneficial to Wuxia. After a night of discussion, the chiefs finally made a decision. They allowed Zhang Qinzhen to resign and let him go. They supported Jiang Tian's establishment of Sidoni. They gave him the green light all the way. They even had to send him on his way. Jiang Tian's trillions of assets were put to use immediately. First, they needed to buy the rest of the Medicine King Group's shares and complete the delisting. They needed close to 100 billion. More importantly, they needed to buy more than 10 warships, countless fighter jets, bombers, helicopters, tanks, artillery, and so on. Because of Jiang Tian's good relationship with the military and the support of Cao Shixiang and the others, the agreement was reached quickly. It was Tai Minghuang's family who negotiated with the military. Zhang Qinzhen was the mastermind behind the scenes. Tai Minghuang used to be a special-class pilot in the Air Force. His family was in the military industry. Even though he was usually frivolous and looked like a rich kid, he had never neglected his professional skills. He knew the data and cost of all kinds of weapons very well. This deal was fair and mutually beneficial for both Sidoni and Wuxia. The contract was worth an astonishing 230 billion Wuxia dollars. Haha. The United States of America sold $20 billion in 2009. Our deal with Master Kong is twice as much as theirs. Cao Shixiang concluded at the celebration meeting. That's right. Master Kong is rich and generous. He might become the next Saudi Arabian. He's a big client. A big boss of the military-industrial group said with anticipation. In order to build a modern army, it was not enough to have a martial arts grandmaster. They were the last trump card, the ultimate weapon, but a conventional combat force was also needed. Tai Minghuang was in charge of recruiting a large number of retired soldiers as reinforcements. Together with the large circle of retired soldiers, the number reached 20,000 in an instant. Among them, There were many retired soldiers from the War Dragon and the Fierce Tigers. For example, Su Yuhang, who had just retired from the Jin City military, went to Yanjin to join the army. For these capable retired soldiers, Jiang Tian gave them very generous conditions. Their annual salary was a few $100,000 according to their skills and qualities. The highest salary was $1 million, plus insurance for injuries and deaths. If they died, they would be compensated in the millions. This kind of salary was far more than any rich mercenary in the world. In fact, the former chief consultant of the War Dragon martial arts sect didn't even need to pay. These iron-blooded ferocious men were willing to follow. In the eyes of these peerless warriors, Master Kong was like a god. They would do anything to follow Master Kong in the war for free. Besides, he also hired the commanders of the War Dragon martial arts sect and modern weapons instructors to conduct military training for the grandmasters and their disciples. Although these grandmasters were powerful, they didn't know how to use modern weapons. This shortcoming had to be fixed. Not only that, Jiang Tian also asked the Observer to make an announcement on the dark web, recruiting soldiers and overlords from all over the world. This time it was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. The entire dark world was stirred up. These overlords of the dark world couldn't be judged by common sense. It was their nature to break the law and provoke the order of society. They were fanatical warmongers, and their hearts were filled with restlessness. War was a great pleasure and a blessing for them. Following Master Kong was like challenging the United States of America and other superpowers. Just thinking about it made them excited. More importantly, the temptation of a cultivation sacred ground was irresistible. Master Kong was building a new order and a new civilization. This was simply too imaginative. One by one, the overlords of the dark world rushed to join Sidoni. One after another, hidden monsters appeared, and were about to show their sharp claws and fangs to the world. They wanted to follow Kong Techu and build a new country that could challenge the superpowers of the world. In addition to the remuneration for these overlords and soldiers, in order to build a modern army, he basically spent 200 billion yuan. In 2009, Wuxia's total military expenditure was 700 billion yuan. Now Jiang Tian's expenditure was equivalent to 1/3 of that. For Sidoni, which was only equivalent to the area of 2 provinces in Wuxia, this was undoubtedly a huge sum of money. As for Jiang Tian, although he was still a hands-off boss and didn't interfere with these specific affairs, he wasn't idle either. He was crazily refining weapons. Chapter 624. On the way back, Jiang Tian had obtained the sky-devouring magic gourd and many other treasures from the Great Circle Treasury. In addition to the resources he had obtained from the Chinese Society, the Cherry Blossom Society, as well as from defeating Miyamoto Genichi and Zeus, his wealth was as vast as the sea. In addition to refining the sky-devouring magic gourd, Jiang Tian also planned to refine some magical artifacts for his disciples. In the past, Jiang Tian was not interested in many of the materials for refining magical artifacts and elixir pills, as they were useless to him. However, now that the battle formation was laid out, and he wanted to build a heavenly army and heavenly generals, Jiang Tian could no longer only consider himself. Before he started refining, Jiang Tian called Zhang Qinzhen over to look at his research results and gave him some guidance on refining magical artifacts. In addition to some technical guidance such as correcting some mistakes, Jiang Tian's guidance was more directional. Zhang Qinzhen's mind was filled with many thoughts, but there were too many for him to take care of. Jiang Tian asked him to focus on a few small and medium-sized magical artifacts, such as the Coelian defense system. As for the other ideas that could not be tested at the moment, he did not want to waste his energy on them. In terms of refining methods, Jiang Tian gave him a book called Classical Refining Essentials for him to study. In the cultivation world, there were many refining schools. The primitive school and the classical school were born in the early stages of the cultivation civilization. The modern school and the postmodern school were also divided into the academic school, the grassroots school, the magical school, and so on. In fact, most of the magical artifacts that Zhang Qinzhen had designed belonged to the academic school of the modern school. It was a magical artifact that had components that could sense information from the outside world. and a crystal processor that could perform high-speed calculations and analysis. It also required many complex components. The magical artifacts of this stage were characterized by complex structures, fine craftsmanship, and intelligent reactions. Although the modern refining school was a latecomer, it had its own advantages. But for Jiang Tian, it also had its own limitations and disadvantages, which was the lack of a lot of high-grade and precious refining materials. The lack of materials on Earth made it difficult to implement many of Zhang Qing'an's ingenious ideas and designs. Jiang Tian believed that if he used the classical refining method, it would be more beneficial for the Kualian system to make a fundamental breakthrough. As for this book, Classical Factions Refining Essentials, it was the culmination of the classical factions refining theories. It could allow Zhang Qing'an to make up for his shortcomings and exploit his strengths while avoiding his weaknesses. Jiang Tian, this book is amazing. It has awakened many of my memories. I think I can build a Kualian weapon system within 5 months. After reading this book, Zhang Qing'an felt as if he had found a treasure. His face was filled with ecstasy, and many ideas had been opened up. All right, don't worry. Jiang Tian patted him on the shoulder and encouraged him. In addition, Jiang Tian also gave him a lot of suitable spirit stones, meteorites, rare metals, precious wood, and other materials. Before they parted ways, Jiang Tian instructed him to communicate more with Taoist Master Hong Yi and other master craftsmen. Presumably, the progress of the research would increase rapidly. These days, Qing'er and Ling are cultivated and made breakthroughs on their own. Jiang Tian had no one to disturb him. After arranging this matter, he began to refine his own tools. First of all, he had to refine the sky-devouring demonic gourd. He spent a lot of time and effort, using various methods to continuously refine this treasure. Finally, he was able to brand his divine sense on it, achieving the magic treasure's acknowledgement of its master, and successfully controlling this magic treasure. This gourd is really extraordinary. It can be called a spiritual item. With my cultivation in the late stage of refining, it took me a month to imprint my divine sense on it and open up the space. On this day, Jiang Tian was wearing a white robe on the incense burner peak. He sighed with a long gaze. Let's try it out. Jiang Tian took the sky-devouring demonic gourd from his waist and pulled out the cork. A look of anticipation appeared on his face. As Jiang Tian activated his divine sense, the many natural patterns on the red gourd flickered red and emitted thousands of rays of light. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, the wind and clouds surged, the sun and the moon dimmed, and the sky changed color. At the mouth of the gourd, a surge of devouring power was formed. Rumble! There was a loud noise. Hundreds of meters away, a granite boulder that was hundreds of meters wide and weighed dozens of tons shook violently. Then, it slowly left the ground and flew toward the mouth of the gourd. The natural spatial patterns on the gourd flickered and filled the air with red light. The mouth of the gourd emitted a black light and the space folded. The boulder that flew over changed rapidly. It kept shrinking and condensing and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Amazing! Jiang Tian was even more surprised when he probed inside with his divine sense. The space within the gourd had a radius of 10 miles, which was equivalent to the space of thousands of storage rings. Moreover, he sensed that the suction force just now was extremely powerful. It could even devour hundreds of tons of material in an instant. Release! Jiang Tian smiled and activated his divine sense. The mouth of the gourd spat out rays of light, and the boulder spurted out. Clang! When the boulder hit the ground, within a radius of a few kilometers, the earth shook and the mountains shook violently, as if a great earthquake had occurred. Even the people in the city could feel the tremors. When I reached the foundational level, I might be able to compress the space inside the demonic gourd and blast it out at the speed of sound. This thing is a super bomb. Jiang Tian smiled lightly, and he was extremely satisfied and complacent. It's time to make armor and disposable flying swords. After the refinement of the gourd, Jiang Tian began to make artifacts for his comrades. Jiang Tian already had an idea of how to make artifacts for others. In the past 3 years, Jiang Tian had obtained countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures, including many rare metals. Soon, Jiang Tian made the best use of everything. At the rate of 5 or 6 sets a day, he had made over 100 sets of armor in a month. Dao patterns were carved on these armors, and incantations flickered about. They were like iron hooks and silver strokes, giving off a wild sense of beauty. Since it is for the Sky Army, let's call it Sky Armor. Jiang Tian rubbed his chin and smiled. Once equipped, these armors could increase the defense power of the Iron Body internal force user to the Grand Master level. If the user was already a Grand Master, they could be upgraded to the Immortal State level and withstand the barrage of missiles and heavy artillery. If the artifact forging masters in the cultivation world saw these armors, they would be shocked. These Dao patterns and spells came from the cultivation civilization, especially the Yaoyang continent, where the artifact forging civilization was highly developed. These were the best armors of the most famous artifact forging sect, the Star Ocean sect. The disposable flying sword was also Jiang Tian's temporary solution. There were too few materials on Earth that were suitable for making flying swords. Flying swords used talisman arrays to draw spirit chi from heaven and earth, or the energy of crystals to create powerful kinetic energy. Its speed could break the sound barrier and achieve extreme speed and attack power. When the energy was drawn, whether it was the vibration of the sword itself, the high temperature caused by the friction with the air, or the release of energy when hitting the target, it would create a violent and destructive force on the sword. Jiang Tian had been lucky before. Xiao Hei's flying sword was modified from the heavenly quartz sword, and the raw material was the fairy tier black gold. But after that, Jiang Tian's luck ran out. He couldn't find any more fairy tier black gold or Gengjin iron essence. The materials in front of him were basically the Heaven Thunder Bamboo, Miyamoto Geniki's Demon Blade Muramesa Fragment, the Divine Knight's Shield and Sword, and Zeus's Scepter, etc. The flying swords he made could only be used 10 times before they exploded and were destroyed. Therefore, Jiang Tian called them disposable flying swords. But at least disposable flying swords had good lethality. They could penetrate a large warship and blow up an airplane. The disposable flying swords combined with Zhang Qianlei's Thunder Talisman might be even more effective. After drawing the design, Jiang Tian had an idea. He contacted Zhang Qianlei and asked him to refine some supreme-grade Thunder Talismans according to his requirements. Zhang Qianlei was also a person who didn't want to lose out. When he heard that Jiang Tian wanted to make a flying sword, he insisted that Jiang Tian make one for him. Jiang Tian had no choice but to make a second-generation disposable flying sword that could fly dozens of times. After refining hundreds of disposable flying swords, Jiang Tian refined a large number of other small talismans and Dharma artifacts, as well as elixirs. After all this, 3 months had passed. The weather was very hot in August, and the sound of cicadas could be heard from the maple trees in Yuhua Mountain Villa. Basically, Jiang Tian had used up all the heavenly treasures that he had accumulated for more than 3 years. However, the harvest was also very rich. Many Dharma artifacts could increase the combat power of Tianjun by 10 times. Although Jiang Tian was invincible in his previous life, he also knew the principle of preparing for a rainy day and winning 100 battles. Even a fierce tiger would use all its strength to catch a rabbit, not to mention that Jiang Tian was about to face a superpower. How could he let his guard down? Although the weather in Yanjing was dry and hot, Yuhua Mountain on Fragrant Mountain was quiet and cool. On this day, Jiang Tian, who was resting for a few days after refining weapons and elixirs, was wearing a long robe and sitting on a recliner under the octagonal pavilion. He was leisurely sipping tea, like a retired grandfather, relaxed and at ease. Qing'er has almost completely absorbed the dragon marrow spirit vein. I'm afraid she's about to break through. Jiang Tian looked at the dragon pith spirit spring that was gradually drying up. His eyes flickered with amazement as he sighed. During this period of time, Zhao Xueqing didn't participate in the huge relocation project. She didn't even ask about it. She had been cultivating and advancing in Yuhua Mountain Villa. Now, Zhao Xueqing was becoming more and more like a real cultivator. She was undistracted, calm and focused. It was as if cultivation was the only meaningful thing in the world. And she was too lazy to care about the worldly affairs. Actually, Jiang Tian wanted to quickly go to Sidoni's new training ground and consume the Guizhong Cauldron Heavenly Pill to quickly break through after a few months of absorbing the Dragon Marrow Spirit Vein. What's the point of wasting time here? These days, Grandpa Jiang Chongqing had reached the early stage of qi refinement and was comparable to a martial arts grandmaster. His parents and sister Ziwei also cultivated diligently when they were not working. Everyone could at least protect themselves in Sidoni and they could set off. However, Qing'er felt that it was not easy for Jiang Tian to take over Yuhua Mountain Villa. The Dragon Marrow Spirit Vein couldn't be wasted. She had to absorb it all. She's scared of being poor. Jiang Tian shook his head and sighed. He could only let Qing'er go. In the secular world, she had always been thrifty and frugal. She would break a penny into 2 petals. This was because she had lost her mother at a young age and was used to a hard life. She cherished the hard-won wealth and material things. This personality was also reflected in her cultivation. Zhao Xueqing cherished cultivation resources very much. She had to make the best use of everything. Zhao Xueqing's stainless phoenix immortal body was also very good. Her speed of absorption and her cultivation was very fast. This Dragon Marrow Spirit Vein weighed dozens of tons and was 100 meters deep. However, Zhao Xueqing had almost completely absorbed it in a few months. Jiang Tian was thinking. Boom. Suddenly, thunder rumbled above the Dragon Marrow Spirit Vein. The air trembled uneasily. Qing'er has broken through. Jiang Tian's face lit up with joy. He couldn't help but stand up and look at Zhao Xueqing in amazement. Chapter 6:25. The first thing Jiang Tian saw was a divine phoenix silhouette that seemed to have been reborn from the flames, and it enveloped Zhao Xueqing's delicate body. Screech. A sharp cry of a phoenix was heard. It was like a whistling arrow that shot into the sky. The sound was so loud that half of Yanjin could hear it. Thunder? And lightning? This lightning is so strange. Why is it so straight and thick? It doesn't disperse for a long time. That's shocking. Countless people in the city looked at the sky above Fragrant Hill in shock. Their pupils contracted and their eyes trembled. For many Yanjin citizens, the pillar of lightning was a wonder of nature. Seeing it disappear after a few minutes, they talked about it for a few days and forgot about it. But for Jiang Tian and the others, it meant a lot. Qing'er had officially entered the late stage of qi refinement. Jiang Tian saw it in shock. A divine phoenix was formed by true essence like fire. It was more than 10 meters tall and flapped its colorful wings. The godly phoenix released tens of thousands of rays of light, thousands of auspicious colors, looking extremely magnificent and resplendent. Suddenly, a wave of aura rose steadily, suppressing the world. This godly phoenix seemed to be riding on the breeze, stepping on the colorful clouds, and breaking through the void. A pair of red phoenix eyes exuded boundless power. It was as if an ancient divine bird was looking down on the world, capable of devouring the heavens and devouring the earth, destroying all living things. The divine power, awe-inspiring phoenix ceremony, has been activated. She has entered the 7th level of qi refinement. Jiang Tian's eyes were filled with shock and surprise. Even though Jiang Tian's divine body had reached phenomenal success, and his soul energy was extremely deep, he still felt a sense of fear when facing Qing'er's soul energy. He couldn't help but exclaim. Her immortal body of the stainless phoenix has also reached phenomenal success. Jiang Tian scanned with his divine sense, and he was shocked and overjoyed. My wife is too powerful. At the same time, Qing'er's immortal body of the stainless phoenix had also reached phenomenal success. Her body was extremely strong and could withstand the bombardment of missiles and artillery. His speed could also break through twice the speed of sound, and he was able to dodge the volleys of missiles, keeping abreast of Jiang Tian. Under the shadow, Zhao Xueqing's ethereal face was shrouded in a sacred 5-colored light, giving people a feeling of holiness, transcendence, and majesty. Did Qing'er make a breakthrough? This is too shocking, too powerful. Hearing the commotion, Yi Ziwei, Jiang Chongqing, Zhang Wanqing, and the others all came over in shock. Yes. Jiang Tian nodded heavily. Good. Our Jiang family has 2 late-stage qi refinement cultivators, which is enough to overlook the entire world. The Americans aren't afraid either. Jiang Changding was greatly comforted. He clapped his hands and sighed emotionally. His eyes were filled with joy. His cultivation was getting richer and richer. He knew that the late stage of qi refinement was enough to suppress the Eastern human immortals and Western sages. As for deity realm and level X ability users, they were no match for him. In the entire United States, there were only a few level X fighters. Boom! Qing'er withdrew her cultivation technique, and the billowing aura suddenly shrank back into her body, returning to her original appearance. She slowly opened her clear eyes. Seeing that everyone was there, she blushed and said embarrassedly, "Why is everyone here? Did I startle you?" "It's okay. Haha. Qing'er, you've made a breakthrough. Let's go," Jiang Changding said with a smile. This time, almost the entire Jiang family had moved to Sidoni. What surprised Jiang Tian was that Jiang Changding, who didn't even want to move to Yanjin, was very supportive of the move. After asking, he found out that Jiang Changding had seen the plague in Sidoni and was very sympathetic. At the same time, he also wanted to join Yuan Kursen and Zhu Jiangchao's medical team. However, Jiang Zhixing said that he wanted to stay in Jinlin City and didn't want to go to Sidoni with Jiang Tian. Regarding this, Jiang Tian also understood. He had just become the secretary of the Jinlin City Committee. He was young and had a bright future ahead of him. As for his safety, Jiang Tian wasn't too worried. Jiang Tian had left him a lot of protective jade talismans. His father had also reached the peak of physique tempering. Ordinary people couldn't hurt him at all. In addition, his father was now a member of the Provincial Standing Committee. Ordinary people wouldn't dare to touch him. Moreover, Jiang Tian had left Su Jinlei and his daughter to protect him. As for his uncles and aunts, the younger generation, Jiang Bangxia, Jiang Lin, and Jiang Chao, were willing to follow Jiang Tian and start a business. However, the older generation was used to being conservative and didn't want to suffer. They wanted to stay in the country. Jiang Tian didn't care about that. Jiang Tian didn't have a deep relationship with them. He left them a few 100 million yuan, which was enough for them to live a good life. He left them to fend for themselves. With Qing'er's breakthrough, everything was ready. The 4-month-long migration finally began. Jingang City Newport Pier. It was crowded and bustling. Everyone was boarding the ship. Oh my God! There's a warship escort? And an aircraft carrier. Someone suddenly exclaimed. Everyone was shocked to see 5 ships flying the Wuxia military flag escorting them. An aircraft carrier called Taichu took the lead. Several fighter jets, bombers and helicopters were parked on it. Together with 22 newly purchased domestic warships, they formed a fleet called Sea of Stars. They pushed open the waves and slowly sailed over from the south. The warships had shiny steel sides. Their cannons were a few meters long and full of sturdy beauty. Their radars rotated like steel blue whales, pushing open the waves and speeding over. There were all kinds of armed helicopters, fighter jets, and all kinds of weapons on the deck. Fully armed air, sea, and land warriors were running and busy on the deck. They were mercenaries formed by Jiang Tian's retired soldiers recruited from Wuxia and from all over the world. They also included elites from the Great Circle and the Fucking Gang in Japan. This force was called the Sky Army. They were only loyal to Jiang Tian and protected the people of Sidoni. But the most eye-catching thing was the aircraft carrier. He was like a giant steel beast, shocking everyone. On the hull of the ship, there were 3 red Chinese characters painted in calligraphy. Taichu. The aircraft carrier Taichu was a decommissioned aircraft carrier purchased by the Hilton family's shipping company from a fleet of the British Royal Navy, and sold it to Jiang Tian. And it only cost £2 million, which was equivalent to 20 million RMB. The aircraft carrier's original name was Excellence. It was an invincible aircraft carrier with a draft of 22,000 tons, and a length of 500 meters. It had served the British Royal Navy for 20 years. In fact, it was not new for aircraft carriers to be sold after they were decommissioned internationally. And the price was not expensive. This was because there was a shortage of berths in the ports of various countries. This aircraft carrier was sold to make room for the new aircraft carrier Elizabeth. And the cost of maintaining an aircraft carrier was very high. In order to save money and focus on building a new aircraft carrier, outdated aircraft carriers were decommissioned, sold, or dismantled. But aircraft carriers were different from civilian ships. They had a lot of toxic materials and were expensive to dismantle. So aircraft carriers were usually not dismantled. They were either sold to some small countries or kept as a maritime military museum. On the aircraft carrier, Paris Hilton was wearing a red dress. The hem of her dress fluttered in the sea breeze. She held a glass of red wine and toasted Jiang Tian. Mr. Jiang, you will definitely make history. Standing on the deck, Jiang Tian nodded slightly and smiled faintly. If the military of Jiang Tian or Sidonie wanted to buy an aircraft carrier, it would definitely be heavily guarded by the major countries. Paris had bought the aircraft carrier in the name of using it as a military museum to avoid the pursuit of the British. But under Zhang Qing'an's guidance and a large group of military experts led by Iron Emperor, the aircraft carrier was now capable of combat and could adapt to the takeoff and landing of domestic fighter jets. When the British found out, they would definitely be furious and hate Paris Hilton to the core. But the Hilton family was also an old-school American tycoon. They had great influence in the political and economic circles of the United States. Paris was not afraid of them. The cruise ship Princess Jenny, that she had bought from the Hilton family, had been renamed Fairsky. Jiang Tian, his family, and many allies were on it. Behind the Fairsky, Yi Gufeng's shipping company had more than 20 shipping ships that formed a transport fleet. They were filled with machinery and equipment from the Medicine King Group and the major manufacturing families under the Sky Alliance. After Jiang Tian boarded the Fairsky cruise ship, all officers and soldiers of the Sky Troop salute the leader. We await your instructions. On the deck of the Taichu, Huaqing Tian stood beside a J-8 fighter jet. He solemnly raised his hand and saluted Jiang Tian. All officers and soldiers of the Sky Troop salute the leader. We await your instructions. On more than 10 military ships, nearly 10,000 fierce soldiers and generals lined up on the deck. They saluted Jiang Tian and shouted at the top of their lungs. The voice clear sky rang out from all directions, its aura soaring into the clouds. The sound of rolling thunder caused even the air in the sky to tremble. None of the spectators were not moved by this. Let's go. Destination: Sidonie Crepe Myrtle Harbor. Jiang Tian's face turned slightly serious. His eyes were firm as he saluted back and waved his hand. Amidst the whining of the sirens, warships set sail one after another. Under the complicated gazes of the people who saw them off, they sailed out of the new harbor and into the open sea, heading south. Once out of the open sea, Jiang Tian will have nothing to do with Wuxia. Chao Shixiang was deeply moved, and his emotions were complicated as he stood in the sending-off party. There was some regret and disappointment, some helplessness, and some deep worry and worry. I believe he will create his own glory. Yi Zhantian sighed with mixed emotions. He definitely will. With Master Kang's strength, even the United States wouldn't dare to provoke him. Chao Jinjia, the Black Tortoise, and the other Dragon Group warriors all waved at Jiang Tian and the others. They were full of reverence and confidence. Violent Dragon, Fox, and many other war dragons also shed tears of reluctance. Son, you will always be my pride. Jiang Zhixing smiled as he saw Chen Fan off. Suddenly he felt his face heat up. He raised his hand to touch it and felt 2 lines of hot tears. Jiang Tian didn't know that when they departed from the port of Wuxia, the Langley building and the Pentagon on the other side of the ocean were in chaos. Chapter 626. The fleet planned to head south first to Southeast Asia. After a short resupply in Singapore, they would pass through the Straits of Malacca and head southwest to Africa. There was no need to stop in Africa. They would pass through the Cape of Good Hope and head west to Sidonie. The voyage would take about a week. In the United States, at the border between Washington, D.C. and Virginia, the Langley building stood quietly by the sparkling Potomac River. Nothing new in the day. What a boring job. Inside the building, a CIB staff member responsible for monitoring Wuxia's territorial waters sipped his coffee while observing the coastal areas of Wuxia through the La Crosse radar satellite as usual. My God, what is this? A new aircraft carrier. When he saw the scene at the Newport Pier, he couldn't help but stare at it with his eyes wide open. It seems that I'm going to be promoted. I can't believe I observed such important information. The agent was suddenly energized. While sipping his black coffee, he quickly typed on the keyboard. All kinds of intelligence analysis and pattern recognition software quickly ran. After some investigation and information summarization, he immediately reported to Colonel Miller. An unfamiliar aircraft carrier has appeared at the new harbor in Wuxia's territorial waters. A series of investigations show that this aircraft carrier has appeared in the Straits of Gibraltar, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Arabian Sea. It should be from Europe. What? Did Wuxia buy another aircraft carrier? Colonel Miller was shocked and frowned. Wuxia had been researching and building aircraft carriers, but it would take some time before they could be put into use. Currently, most of Wuxia's aircraft carriers were purchased, such as Minsk, Valerian, and so on. No, our Lacrosse radar satellite's observation ability is accurate to 0.3 meters. We can confirm that the flag of this aircraft carrier is not Wuxia, but from Sidoni, the agent said with a strange expression. Due to the need for self-preservation, the CIB agents had many levels and were directly responsible to their superiors. There was no overlap in their work. In his opinion, Sidoni was the poorest country in the world. The average daily income was not even enough to buy a can of Coke. They must be crazy to import aircraft carriers. They should be buying pork. Sidoni? Colonel Methria was shocked. He stood up and said quickly, "Gather all the information and give it to me in an hour, no, in half an hour." Yes. The agent was puzzled. Why was Colonel Miller more shocked and nervous than when he heard about the new aircraft carrier in Wuxia? The efficiency of the CIA was not to be underestimated. 10 minutes later, a report was sent to Colonel Miller. After receiving the report, Colonel Miller went straight to the CIB director's office. Seeing this scene, the agent stood in the corridor with a shocked expression and muttered, "My God, the report I made is going to be handed to Director Sheldon. Maybe the president will see it. I'm afraid I'm going to be promoted." In the United States, ever since the establishment of the CIA, the first person that every president met every day was the director of the CIA. Every president's first appointment and change would be the director of the CIA. The director of the CIA was directly appointed by the president and also served as a senior intelligence advisor to the president and Congress. He was often called the ears of the president, which showed the importance of this position. The current director of the CIA, Shelton, was 56 years old. He was a Republican in his 60s, and his hair was gray. He wore a pair of glasses and held a pipe in his mouth. He had the air of a scholar and gave off a refined and cultured feeling. In fact, he was energetic, astute, and very scheming. The Americans jokingly called him the Fox director of the CIA. Colonel Miller, after the 1960s, superhumans and the so-called divine state have ceased to exist. But Kang Tae-chu's sudden rise is against common sense. You know, those so-called divine state are very afraid of the United States. What do you think? Sheldon frowned and asked after listening to the report. Although Colonel Miller was now in charge of the international superhumans who had long been relegated to a marginal position, he had served in the Langley building for more than 30 years and had rich experience. Sheldon still respected his opinion. Kang Tae-chu is far beyond any superhumans and cultivators we have encountered before. Colonel Miller's body was as straight as a sword. His face was solemn as he said firmly, "His confidence is based on his powerful strength. We suspect that he belongs to a different life form and represents a completely different civilization. His rise has the possibility of subverting the existing civilization order centered on technology and a free economy. Various intelligence reports show that the new order he established in the United States is a kind of false democracy centered on a serious cult of personality. It is a more deceptive dictatorship and personal centralization. Obviously, this is not in line with our values." At this point he straightened his body, and his eyes bloomed with sharp killing intent. He said coldly, "Wuxia has an old saying, cut the weeds and dig up the roots to prevent future trouble. I think the United States should pay high attention to Kang Tae-chu and Sidoni and strike hard. Directly destroy Kang Tae-chu. What you said makes a lot of sense. Shelton nodded, and a hint of solemnity appeared on his face. A dictatorial country is not scary. A dictatorial military power is scary. The total amount of his military purchases is very considerable. Now his threat to us has surpassed North Korea and Iran. Shelton, the president, Rockefeller, and other established American plutocrats were in the same camp. These families were originally coveting Sidoni's Fermi magnetite and supported the war. Shelton and the others wanted to get rid of Jiang Tian, so it was reasonable to start a local war. As for Kang Tae-chu's crimes, supporting terrorist activities or possessing weapons of mass destruction were all fine. This time, he had just bought a large number of warships and tanks. Everyone would believe him if he said he had nuclear weapons or something. With this thought in mind, Shelton took a deep puff from his pipe, waved his hand to disperse the smoke, and said in a deep voice, "Form a more complete report. We will submit it to the President and the National Security Council." Yes. Just as Colonel Miller was about to leave, suddenly, a senior assistant rushed into the office and said, "Director Shelton, something has happened." "What? Don't you know how to knock?" Shelton frowned, looking very unhappy. "Sir, the Democrat, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Dianne Feinstein, has made a public speech, reprimanding the CIA for illegally searching their computers to remove material that is unfavorable to the CIA. The senior assistant said nervously, "They have prepared 6,400 pages of material, and the President of the Senate has said that they will declare war on the CIA. What? The Senate Intelligence Committee is taking such extreme action?" Colonel Methreya quickly took out his phone, opened the browser, and Google News. America had a system of 3 separate powers. Legislative power, executive power, and judicial power belonged to Congress, the cabinet led by the president, and the court. The Congress of America was the executive power. Congress had a lot of power, just like the people of Wuxia. Under the premise of conclusive evidence, Congress had the right and ability to impeach and re-elect the president. In America's history, there were 3 presidents, Andrew, Nixon, and Clinton, who were impeached by Congress and stepped down. Dianne Feinstein was the sworn enemy of the CIA, the Iron Lady of the United States Senate. She was known for her ruthlessness, meticulous thinking, superb tactics, and tough attitude. She was known as the woman who dared to challenge the President of the United States. However, what shocked Colonel Miller was that this time, even the President of the Senate had spoken. In the media, he waved his fist and roared, shouting at the CIA across the air. "The CIA eavesdropped on Congress, searched our computers, stole and transferred documents, lied to the Senate, stole the phone records of the Associated Press and other media outlets, and threatened the media controllers." The President of the Senate was filled with righteous indignation, and his words were tough. "They have destroyed civil liberties and the right to know, and destroyed the separation of powers. They should know that Congress is not a toy dog, but the supervisor of the CIA. We have a large number of seats on the Committee of Appropriations, and have the right to veto their funding requests. Maybe they don't know. Then maybe we need to teach them a lesson. These materials will be submitted to the Supreme Court. If this information is true, some people will be arrested and jailed." As he read, Colonel Methreya's expression changed drastically, and cold sweat poured down. At present, many business and political media outlets around the world quickly followed up, and the wording and comments were almost one-sided. They spoke one after another, harshly criticizing the CIA's actions, and their attitudes were unprecedentedly radical and unified. If Congress chooses to be tough to the end, it can make Shelton's political career a living nightmare. Some media outlets commented gloatingly, "The House of Representatives' 40 minutes of clear statements has made the battle between the House of Representatives and the CIA reach a climax. High-level struggle, the feud between the CIA and the Senate has been exposed, and the U.S. government may shut down." This scandal is no less than the Watergate incident. The Watergate incident forced Nixon to step down, and this time, it may be President Bush's turn. Some media outlets' headlines were shocking. "The CIA's violent law enforcement has made the U.S. senators lose their dignity and decency." In fact, the CIA's actions have angered Europe and neighboring countries. The Congressional Intelligence Committee's clear statement shows that the relationship between the CIA and Congress has fallen to a freezing point. I think President Bush has to make a statement and choose which side to stand on. Some media outlets express this opinion. Don't panic. Congress just wants to get the respect they deserve. They won't dare to do anything to us. Looking at these reports, Shelton sneered and immediately ordered the deputy director to prepare for a press conference. As a roly-poly in the political world, he had experienced this level of struggle several times and had rich experience, so there was no need for him to appear in person. Chapter 627. The deputy director's wording was also very appropriate as he sincerely claimed that this was just a misunderstanding. The CIB had never wanted to break the separation of powers, nor had they ever tried to weaken the power of Congress. Those so-called computer searches were just technical testing and protection. The original documents were never damaged. After the deputy director held a press conference in the morning, the situation seemed to have calmed down. President Bush called Shelton, but it was mainly to appease and provide strategic guidance. President Bush thought that this was just an ordinary political struggle, and that Congress currently had no evidence to impeach the president and reorganize the cabinet. Those old foxes in Congress want to fight with us? They're still lacking. Shelton hung up the phone and sneered. Congress won't be able to get enough leverage. Also, the court may not be on their side. The court's investigation will take at least 3 months, and this time is enough for us to eliminate the relevant evidence. The deputy directors and other senior officials present showed a smug smile and nodded. Shelton's face suddenly turned cold, no longer having the elegance of the past. Instead, his eyes were malicious and ruthless like a wolf that chose to devour the earth. He said coldly, "Dianne Feinstein, that stinking woman, is a vicious dog that always stares at the CIB and bites and barks. How abominable. Investigate her, use funds and personnel from outside the staff. I want to take her down at all costs. Dig out all the dirt on her, including the sex scandals." Yes. A senior agent accepted the order and left. Shelton's order had the power to topple mountains and overturn seas. Suddenly, hundreds of undercover agents heard the news and began to investigate Dianne Feinstein and the others. Seeing this scene, Colonel Miller was very impressed and couldn't help but silently give a thumbs up. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Shelton was the real old fox. But at this moment, a bombshell that had been brewing for a long time exploded again. It was like a bolt of lightning from the 9 heavens crashing down, pointing at Hilton and almost blowing him to pieces. Before leaving work in the afternoon, Dianne Feinstein gathered the media again and threw out a bombshell, and the one who cooperated with her was a former CIB Grade 10 agent, Jones. Dianne Feinstein directly released a set of 3,000 pages of investigation reports, directly criticizing the CIA's mistreatment of prisoners of war. The report claimed that the investigation began in 2006 and lasted for more than 4 years. Over the past 4 years, under Shelton's instructions, the CIA agents used various methods such as rectal water supply, Murphy drip, sleep deprivation, electric drill torture, and broom rape to inhumanely abuse 213 prisoners of war and enemy intelligence personnel. The report also published relevant videos and photos. As soon as this news spread, it was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, and the entire world was in an uproar and filled with righteous indignation. American military institutions and consulates around the world were put on level 1 alert to prevent retaliation and violent attacks. Moreover, the release of this report had seriously damaged the relationship with some of the Allied countries. Isn't the United States a country that promotes human rights? Excuse me, where is human rights? A senior officer from the British MI5 asked angrily. The CIA's actions have seriously undermined the Declaration of Human Rights that they uphold. This is tantamount to slapping themselves in the face. Senior Russian KGB intelligence officers were shouting in the media. The world's superpowers were not monolithic. In fact, there were more internal conflicts. Before, there was the struggle for hegemony between the United States and the Soviet Union, And after that there was the Cold War that lasted for many years. These superpowers all arranged for a large number of agents to steal each other's intelligence. Of course, there were also many intelligence personnel who were captured and imprisoned. At this time, seeing their own intelligence personnel being abused like this, many senior officials of these countries couldn't sit still and put pressure on the United States, strongly condemning it. International human rights organizations were also filled with righteous indignation and filed a complaint in the United States court, demanding the arrest of Shelton and the investigation of the CIA's mistreatment of prisoners of war and intelligence personnel. I support the investigation by Congress. Shelton must step down. He is the biggest threat to the security of the United States. Not only was there a lot of pressure from abroad, but even within the Republican Party, which was in the same camp as Shelton and President Bush, there were also a large number of people who supported Dianne Feinstein's report. These Republicans participated in the Vietnam War, became prisoners of war, and suffered inhumane abuse. They couldn't accept this kind of scandal. On the streets of Washington, thousands of human rights organization members and citizens took to the streets, burning the stars and stripes and the CIA's flag. The president and cabinet's public support plummeted. Jones, this traitor, shameless. Too shameless. At this time, Shelton was completely panicking. He realized that Dianne Feinstein and Congress's attack on him was definitely well prepared. Moreover, it was aimed at his weakness, and there was even more to it. The right to privacy, the right to freedom of the press, the separation of powers, and equal human rights were all core values of the United States. With the president's support, Shelton could trample on one or two of them, but if he violated every one of them, the scandals would explode one after another, and repeatedly touch the bottom line of the American people. Then even the president wouldn't dare to protect him. This time, Shelton personally called Dianne Feinstein, hoping to get the other party's understanding and support, but the other party simply refused to talk. In the face of heated public opinion, strong international pressure, and different voices within the party, Shelton had no choice but to hold a press conference. He said with a heavy expression, "Exposing the truth like this and embarrassing the United States is a small matter, but more importantly, it will bring instability to the United States. Using torture is definitely dishonorable, but in the specific operations, it exists in every country. It's just that there has never been a country like the United States that has made it public." He complained with grievance. "What's wrong with Congress? What's wrong with the United States? You have to know that we're fighting for national security." Before he could finish his sentence, a broken shoe flew out and landed squarely on his face. "You're a dictator. You have to step down. The Associated Press will fight you to the end." The person who threw the shoe was a reporter from the Associated Press. When he was taken out by the bodyguards, he was still cursing nonstop. "I'm very disappointed in your actions. You have to know that the CIA is protecting the United States." Shelton suppressed his anger and tried his best to maintain his poise. He pointed at the reporter and scolded coldly. "Get lost. Step down. We protest, you have to step down. The American people are not underage children. We don't need to be monitored. Congress is not your toy." All the reporters were furious. At this moment, they forgot their journalistic ethics, took off their shoes, and threw them at Shelton. The scene of Sia Erkin being smashed was broadcasted live by the media for hundreds of millions of people to see. The press conference had to end hastily. Without a doubt, this is the most miserable, the most pathetic, and the ugliest press conference in the history of the CIA. No one trusts the CIA and Langley Building anymore, because they no longer protect the people, but have become tools for the powerful to control the citizens. Some media reporters commented, "The only one who really shamed the United States is the CIA. To be exact, it's only Hilton." In response to Shelton's speech, Dianne Feinstein immediately accepted the media interview and shouted across the air, "Congress dares to expose itself because we believe that the United States is a great country. When it makes a mistake, it has the courage to admit and correct it. The United States is also a confident country, and will learn from these events. I think those shoes have already shown the attitude of the American people." They flew towards the CIA, not Congress. Congress will always fight to protect the rights of the people. In this situation, even President Bush could not sit still. He spoke overnight and painfully expressed his deep regret and self-reproach for the series of evil acts committed by the CIA. The Judicial Department would investigate and give the people an explanation. They would not tolerate the abuse of the CIA. That night, Shelton was secretly summoned by the president to the president's residence in the White House to discuss the matter. Shelton, the situation is very tricky. Obviously, Congress is fully prepared. President Bush's expression was extremely solemn. Mr. President, Congress's investigation has been going on for several years, but why did it suddenly erupt at this time? I think there must be a mastermind behind the scenes. Shelton had to admit that both he and the president were facing an unprecedented crisis. The president was likely to abandon the pawn to protect the general, and his political career was likely to be over. It should be the California Consortium. The president sighed helplessly. In the Congress, only Mr. Marshall can control so many seats and have such overwhelming power. Obviously, you have offended him. This is like the biggest joke in the world. Shelton laughed self-deprecatingly and shook his head gently. If I have ever offended him, it can only be because I ordered them to delete legends related to the god Sidoni. This does offend their interests and goes against the spirit of freedom of the press. But this is not enough for him to use such a huge force. In short, Shelton was someone who served the powerful, but Marshall was the real powerful. Marshall's opponents should be the leaders of the Rockefeller and the DuPont Consortium, not him. They were not opponents on the same order of magnitude. It was like when two groups of people were fighting. The other party's boss was chasing a lackey to death. It did not make sense at all. Moreover, even if Marshall controlled many seats in Congress, mobilizing such a huge force would cost him hundreds of millions of USD. But Shelton's previous threats against Facebook and other networks and media companies to delete posts brought minimal losses. This kind of seemingly unreal news brought less traffic than a scandal of a Hollywood star. On the other hand, Marshall should understand that the CIA must have done this for the overall interests of the United States, and the interests of the California Consortium were also part of the interests of the United States government. But as of now, we have no better explanation. President Bush smiled helplessly. If Mr. Marshall really wants to step down, I am willing to take responsibility and resign for the interests of the party. Shelton expressed his stance with a look of grief and indignation, but this stance was precisely in the hope that the president would retain him. Maybe we have no choice but to do this. The president shrugged helplessly and said with a moved expression, "The party and the United States will remember your meritorious deeds." At this moment, Marshall was so angry that his whole body trembled. But in the end, he could only sigh helplessly. "Very well, I will submit my resignation letter tomorrow." Chapter 628. After Shelton left, the president shook his head and said, "Shelton is too idealistic. I'm afraid it won't be enough for him to resign. This time he'll go to jail." "Aren't you going to protect him? After all, you were the one who ordered the surveillance of Congress." The First Lady, who was wearing a business suit, walked over gracefully and asked with a smile, "But Shelton has no evidence. When we talked, we were all in our private residence." President Bush said, "Also, the prisoner abuse investigation started in 2001 and spanned my term. I wasn't the president at that time. This shows that their target was Shelton, not me. But this also reminds me that they are giving in. If I continue to protect Shelton, they will attack me and impeach me next. I can only choose to cooperate with Congress and the Supreme Court's investigation." "But how did Shelton offend Mr. Marshall?" The First Lady sipped her red wine and asked curiously. "You know, Marshall and the California Consortium were never willing to fall out with the president and cabinet." "I don't know. Marshall didn't hesitate to offend us, lose industrial interests, and lose many high-tech industry support policies just to attack Shelton. This means that they will definitely gain more benefits." President Bush shook his head with a wry smile. His gaze was long as he sighed. "But what benefits will they gain? When Marshall submitted his resignation letter to the president, he was taken away by the federal court. He was suspected of interfering with Congress's work, abusing prisoners of war, and eavesdropping on the private information of the public. He was also the first CIA director not taken away by the Judicial Department, making history in the United States. When he was taken away, Marshall's face was ashen as he gritted his teeth. But until his death, he still couldn't figure out where his opponent was, and why he had such a tragic ending. Seeing this scene, many CIA and Pentagon officials shuddered and rushed to San Francisco's Deer Leap wine cellar to visit Mr. Marshall. Of course, Mr. Marshall denied manipulating Congress and the Judicial Department, but he also hinted at various subtle messages that this matter was related to the god Sidoni. But the hawkish officials of the CIA and the Department of Defense immediately understood. The many investigations against Sidoni and Jiang Tian, as well as the various funding and attack plans, came to an abrupt end. They might not be afraid of the threat of Kong Techu and the so-called other civilization, but they were afraid of the California Consortium, which was close at hand and had a lot of influence in American politics. There was no need for them to worry unnecessarily and lose their positions and freedom, because of threats that might not necessarily come. I didn't expect the president and cabinet to be so weak. The CIA's PRISM plan hasn't even been made public, and they're already so scared. On Sunny Sky, Jiang Tian was talking to Mr. Marshall through the satellite phone. He slapped his thigh and laughed. I think we should keep the PRISM plan for now. Marshall sipped his red wine and said with a smile. Only a dagger hidden behind your back can scare people, right? Keep them. If the CIA and the Pentagon don't behave themselves, we'll release them. Jiang Tian smiled faintly and hung up the phone. He looked at the vast sea and let out a long sigh. The fleet was about to reach Singapore. When they passed by the Straits of Malacca, Jiang Tian reluctantly got off the ship and met with his loyal follower, Li Xianlong, despite all the requests from the president of Singapore. Grandmaster Jiang, congratulations, congratulations. You finally have your own territory. Master Kong controlled Marika remotely, controlled the Senate, and defeated the CIA. You've shocked the world. In the presidential palace, Li Xianlong bowed deeply, his face full of respect. Beside him, Hongbone Mage, Guilili, and the others accompanied him. No, I just want Sidoni to be prosperous. Jiang Tian smiled faintly. If Master Kong has any requests, I'll support you with all my might. Li Xianlong smiled. Jiang Tian nodded slightly. Li Xianlong had done well in the process of Sidoni's establishment. He had provided a lot of financial, human, and material support. Singapore was also the first country in the world to recognize Sidoni's new government and establish diplomatic relations with it. After that, it was Wuxia, South Korea, and Japan. Both Li Jinju and Sasaki Haisha had put in a lot of effort. After Yi Ziwei introduced the concept of Sidoni to Li Xianlong in detail, Li Xianlong was very interested. He said fawningly, Master Kong, this longevity sanatorium is amazing. I wonder if I can get 1 or 2 permanent residency certificates for Sidoni. Sure. Since you've entered my sect and become my disciple, you should receive my protection. Jiang Tian said with a smile. Both sides had a good chat. Suddenly Jiang Tian's phone rang. It was Chen Yang. Master, I have something to report to you. Speak. In the past 2 months, there have been ships dumping garbage at Sidoni's port. The garbage includes medical waste and nuclear waste. The pollution is very serious. Almost all the marine products have died. Some of the coastal residents have also contracted strange diseases. Chen Yang said. Beat them up. Just kill them and take their ships. What's the point of talking so much? Jiang Tian frowned. But they didn't enter the territorial waters. They're in international waters. It's the ocean currents that brought the garbage here. Chen Yang said awkwardly. It's against international law if we do it. You may be the president in the future. What do you plan to do? Jiang Tian asked with a smile. Chen Yang knew that his master was testing him, so he quickly said, In the 1960s, land-based pollution of the marine environment attracted a lot of attention from the international community. In 1972, The Stockholm Convention adopted the seventh principle of the Declaration, which clearly stated that the country should strengthen the control of land-based pollution of the marine environment, especially in closed and semi-closed waters. Today, the international legal framework to regulate land-based pollution of the marine environment has begun to take shape. The typical examples are international customary law, the United States Convention on the Law of the Sea, the Montreal Guidelines, Agenda 21, and the 1995 Global Action Plan to prevent land-based pollution of the marine environment. The agency responsible for maintaining the safety of the global marine environment is the United States Environment Program. As for this incident, I think we should first use diplomatic channels to plead with France through the United States Environment Program. We should state the facts and ask for national compensation or commercial compensation from the New World. Jiang Tian nodded and said, "Yes, we should use diplomatic channels to urge France to stop the invasion and warn them that we may start a war. If France stops the invasion, admits its mistake, and agrees to pay compensation and pollution control, then forget it. After all, we're a peace-loving country. Who doesn't make mistakes? If they don't agree, then we'll dig up all the garbage and dump it on the French territorial waters. Or directly into the Buckingham Palace. Chunyang, you'll be responsible for this." "Yes, master, I understand." Chunyang immediately took action. Jiang Tian hung up the phone and said goodbye to Li Xianlong. He flew to Sidoni with Qing'er. The Sky Troop fleet was protected by Wuxia warships, and they were well armed. Except for the fleets of the five superpowers, no one dared to provoke them. Therefore, Jiang Tian was quite assured. "Do you feel like you're flying?" Jiang Tian sat cross-legged on the flying sword, holding Zhao Xueqing's slender waist, and asked with a smile. Speaking of which, this was the first time the couple shared a flying sword after Blackie's flying sword was refined. In fact, Qing'er's flying sword had been refined. It was refined with Zeus's scepter, but Jiang Tian felt that it was more comfortable for the two of them to share a flying sword. "Well, it feels good. Especially for this kind of long-distance flight. Where are we going?" Zhao Xueqing smiled and said. "To Xanadu." Jiang Tian smiled and said. "Do you have to be so dramatic?" Qing'er said coquettishly. "Sidoni has already built it very well. The Taichu sect's training ground on Tianqing Mountain has a beautiful environment and abundant spirit qi. There are no mortal disturbances, so we can focus on cultivation. If this is not Xanadu, what is it?" Jiang Tian said seriously. "This is indeed Xanadu, but that's the past. From now on, this is the Black Skeleton Dump. In the waters north of Sidoni, a cruiser cruised slowly as if it was its own home. A tall and mighty one-eyed soldier stood on the deck with his hands on his hips, laughing sinisterly. Above his head, a blood-red flag fluttered in the wind. On it was a black skull with blood oozing out of its eye sockets. It opened its bloody mouth as if it was about to swallow someone whole. If an international fishing boat were to see this, they would probably have to avoid it and be terrified. This was because this was the infamous Black Mamba mercenary group. The Black Mamba mercenary group was registered in France, but they had operations all over the world. They had tens of thousands of members, and were equipped with all kinds of advanced weapons. They even had 7 or 8 cruisers. They had a long history that could even be traced back to the East India Company. In terms of strength, the Black Skeleton was on par with the Russian Polar Bear mercenary group, second only to the Blackwater mercenary group in South Africa. "Colonel Dixon, thank you for personally escorting and protecting the New World Renewable Energy Company. These Sidoni pirates are so annoying." An old man wearing a silk shirt and a red bow tie walked out with 2 glasses of red wine in his hand, and said with a smile. This old man had a head full of silver hair, like an old gentleman in the French countryside. His smile was kind, elegant, and extraordinary. Although Dixon was the chief instructor and commander-in-chief of the Black Skeleton, he preferred to be called Colonel Dixon by his military rank in the French Royal Navy. Wilson knew this very well. "Sir Wilson, don't worry. With the Black Skeleton, no one from Sidoni would dare to offend you. They are just a bunch of uncivilized black monkeys. This is a no-man's land." Colonel Dixon took the glass and took a sip, enjoying the Atlantic Ocean monsoon as he smiled proudly. Of course, the service of the black skeleton is undoubtedly excellent. I'm glad to have a partner like you. Wilson smiled and raised his glass. Colonel Dixon raised his glass, but his face was instantly covered with a layer of sadness. But as you know, Sidonie has recently formed a new government. This is no longer the world of my old comrade, Kuba. A fierce look flashed across his only eye as he said in a deep voice, when he was around, he let us do whatever we wanted. But now we might still encounter resistance. So, I want to increase the reward to 10 million USD per escort. Chapter 629. Colonel Dixon, friendship is friendship, business is business. The remuneration of 5 million USD for each voyage is something we've discussed. Wilson shook his head helplessly and said, I'm afraid I can't comply. Our profits are limited, and 5 million is already the limit we can afford. Honorable Sir Wilson, Colonel Dixon held the railing and sneered. Do you think I don't know your profits? Your partners are Glaxo and more than a dozen pharmaceutical giants, as well as many nuclear power plants. And every time you dispose of the garbage, the remuneration you receive from the pharmaceutical giants and nuclear power plants, as well as the government's rewards, exceed 100 million USD. But what about your costs? It's just a few ships. I'm afraid it's less than $1 million USD. This is a profitable business. What about us? You know, there are more than 300 soldiers and sailors on this ship. They have to go through more than 10 days of arduous sailing, facing tropical storms and other bad weather, as well as the abominable Sidonie pirates. They're exchanging their lives for money, but the remuneration is only a few thousand USD. Colonel Dixon, as expected of someone who spent time in the French Marine Corps. I can't hide anything from you. Wilson smiled bitterly and helplessly. But the New World Renewable Energy Company doesn't belong to me alone. There are many shareholders. I'm afraid your proposal won't pass the board of directors. They'll pass. You won't find a better partner in France, or even in the world. Dixon smiled domineeringly. Also, you can tell those old fogies that if they don't agree, I'll expose it to the BBC. I think they'll be very interested in these dirty tricks. You'll announce internationally that these pollution sources have been disposed of by you with high technology and a lot of money. In fact, you're just treating Sidonie's North Bay as a garbage dump and dumping it here without any treatment. And this garbage is all toxic medical waste. What's even more terrifying is nuclear waste. Colonel Dixon, you're destroying the friendship and trust we've built with great difficulty. Wilson's face stiffened, and he was furious, but the good upbringing of a French gentleman allowed him to suppress his anger. No, on the contrary, I've always cherished my friendship with Sir Wilson, Colonel Dixon said with a lazy smile. If you can help me achieve my goal, I'll give you $1 million USD for every escort. My understanding of friendship is very simple. It's to give a friend the greatest benefits. What do you think? Butcher? What a butcher! What an unpredictable guy. Wilson cursed inwardly, but he could only raise his goblet and say seriously, well then, let's toast to our friendship. Crash! In front of them, more than a dozen large garbage ships had their boards opened, revealing piles of stinky garbage. Several large excavators were activated. The mechanical arms that were more than 10 meters long twisted, and the huge bucket dumped piles of garbage that had been simply packed into the blue sea water. Only a few minutes later, a layer of colorful garbage floated on the surface of the sea within a radius of over 10 miles. Disposable medical supplies, gauze stained with blood, expired drugs, yellow nuclear waste, and black oil stains of unknown composition. The clear blue seawater had already turned black, and the waves became smooth and powerless under the pressure of the viscous oil film. Half an hour later, garbage and sewage flowed along the ocean current into Sidonie's territorial waters and coastal areas. The beach, which had been full of vitality and grass, was now covered by a layer of black oil and garbage. Fish that had died due to lack of oxygen floated on the surface. Their gradually grayish-white eyes stared at the sky in despair. Seagulls and all kinds of waterfowl struggled in the oil stains. They were like black sculptures made of asphalt. Only their eyes could prove that they were living creatures. They're here again. Oh my God! These despicable devils. At this moment, dozens of Sidoni natives from nearby tribes appeared on the beach. They were skinny and scantily clad. They cursed the distant ships in their native language and fished out the seabirds with tears in their eyes. They soaked the waterfowl in detergent, trying to wash off the oil stains on their bodies. But it was very difficult. The oil and feathers stuck together tightly. With just a little bit of force, the feathers fell off along with the oil stains. Most of these waterfowl died. A few skinny black men with bare backs, wearing flowery pants and slippers and carrying old-fashioned rifles, danced angrily, shouting and cursing. Some fired at Dixon's fleet. But the distance between the two sides was more than 10 nautical miles, far beyond the range of rifles. The bullets fell powerlessly into the endless sea less than 1,000 meters away. They did not cause any waves, nor could they hurt Colonel Dixon and the others. No one paid attention to them at all. The garbage continued to be dumped. The surface of the sea was filled with garbage and dead tuna, lobsters and prawns, emitting a strong stench. Fuck the oil. Fuck the oil, it's hot. The Black brothers were furious. They expressed their anger in the simplest English. This is the third time this month. A skinny child, about 13 or 14 years old, hugged a dead seabird and cried helplessly. Every time he wiped his tears, a large amount of dirt would be left on his face. He was covered in poisonous sores that flowed with thick water. This was because the seawater had polluted his drinking water and food, causing him to be infected with many strange diseases. But compared to the physical pain, the helplessness and pain of watching the offshore sea, which was originally used as a granary, be polluted was even more heart-wrenching. Babulu, are you willing to fight with us? An old man with a head full of white hair stroked his head kindly. It seemed that he was also a tribal chief or something like that. Grandpa Simba, I'm willing. I'm going to kill them. Babulu clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. The glorious Sidoni pirates. We're going to fight them to the death. Protect our territorial waters and granaries. Children of Sidoni, move. We want to protect our suffering motherland. The beginning will protect us. Simba raised his arms and shouted. As soon as he gave the order, everyone immediately started to move. The black youths picked up a few rubber boats covered with plastic tape from the woods and put them into the water. They jumped on and paddled with all their might. Babulu held an ancient book with a portrait of Jiang Tian printed on the cover, raised a tattered national flag, and stood straight at the head of the leading rubber boat. The black people had not eaten for many days. Their faces were dark and their bodies were thin. Their physiques were very weak. After paddling for a while, they were panting, and bean-sized beads of sweat oozed out of their dark skin. Their heartbeats were speeding up, and they slowly felt a sharp pain. Their hearts almost jumped out of their chests. But they did not slack off and paddled with all their might. The two rubber boats broke through two white waves on the calm sea, and they could even make the tattered national flag flutter in the wind. They did not say a word and stared at the ship that splashed the garbage. They panted and paddled with all their might. Every time they paddled, the rubber boats broke through the waves and rushed forward more than 10 meters. Their movements were precise and uniform, like a program that entered an endless loop, like tireless machines. In the vast and boundless sea, their small rubber dinghies were so small that they were even smaller than an ant. The spaceship, which was full of garbage, did not speed up or slow down. It slowly operated according to the established procedures. Piles of poisonous and stinking medical garbage fell into the calm seawater. The black people continued to paddle. The anemia caused by the lack of oxygen had turned the world into a black fog in their eyes. Children, can't you take it anymore? Simba asked in a deep voice. Do you feel that the fire in your heart is about to be extinguished? He revealed a fatherly smile. If you don't want to be extinguished, then ignite yourself in the name of Tai Chu. In the name of Tai Chu, ignite us. The black people shouted, feeling the blood in their bodies burning. Grandpa Simba also picked up the paddle and paddled with all his might. He roared to the sky. Although we will die, we have to let them see our stance. We are not afraid of death. Although they were fully mentally prepared, they still froze when they rushed into the fleet. The rubber boats only glided forward mechanically under inertia. The French ships were too big, bigger than many mountains they had seen before. The setting sun plated a layer of gold on the huge fleet. Surrounded by the fleet, the black people seemed to be moving in an isolated basin. In this desolate world, only the sound of their paddles echoed. After fainting from the shock, Simba tried his best to calm himself down. He pointed at a ship that was dumping garbage and said in a deep voice, "Children, we're in range. Fire!" Bang! 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 The black brothers poured their bullets out to their heart's content. The bullets did not leave any obvious marks on the ship's hull. All the ships were as steady as a rock. They were like tigers looking down on ants. They arrogantly remained motionless and continued to dump garbage. "Pull away and shoot their people," Grandpa Simba ordered. The rubber boats quickly retreated and pulled away from the ships. Grandpa Simba's thin body straightened. He picked up the rifle and narrowed his eyes to aim. Pa! A New World staff member fell into a pool of blood. The crew was in chaos as they reported the information to Colonel Dixon. Colonel Dixon immediately took measures. It was like a lion being stung by a lowly ant. Although it did not hurt his muscles and bones, it only made him slightly angry. However, he still used the lightest measure to eliminate these ants. Boom! Under Dixon's command, a ship suddenly turned sideways, and a mountain-like wave formed. The huge waves that blotted out the sky and covered the earth instantly overturned several rubber dinghies. Simba and the others were swept into the deep sea. 3 black brothers suffocated to death, and their bodies sank to the bottom of the sea. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.